Struggle to pull themselves out of. Move in the right direction. Take one step forward and let go of what's going to happen.
Alrighty, chat. Let's get. Oh, why is this so laggy? Why am I laggy? Hold on a second. I think I have to fix something. Oh. Give me a second, chat. Hold on. So I'm gonna stop streaming for a second and then I will restart. Hopefully this does not break everything on the planet. Yep. We're gonna go ahead and close that. I'm gonna stop. All right. And okay, we should be good. All right. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Dr. Alo Kanoja. Just a reminder that although I'm a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is for educational or entertainment purposes only. So if y'all have a medical concern or question, please go see a licensed professional. So we are going to be talking to the awesome Botez sisters today. I have no idea what we're going to be talking about. That's just how we do things here. We're going to talk about whatever they want to talk about, whatever we feel like talking about. We're just going to be vibing. And so hopefully it'll be a great conversation. They live very interesting lives, you know, are absolutely in the public eye, are super awesome and competitive. So I'd be super curious just what like a day in their life looks like. But before we hop in, just a couple of quick announcements. So we're almost at the end of Mental Health Awareness Month. We've had awesome streams and events and things like that. Our final stream, I think, is tomorrow, where we're going to be doing like a doctors versus AI competition. And then we have a lot of great stuff coming up actually in June. I think next Friday, we're going to be interviewing Primogen, who's a programmer, who's also a streamer, makes a lot of cool content. We have a couple of cool membership lectures coming up. I'm going to be doing a deep dive into anger. So if y'all are interested in understanding what anger is, where it comes from, things like that, we're going to be doing that. And then we have another guest lecture coming in on the membership side, Dr. Tori, who's going to be talking about internal family systems, which is something that I haven't used a whole lot clinically. So if y'all are interested in that stuff, check it out. The other thing that we've going on is we've got 2 days left of our community challenge, which is in case of crash out, break glass. So this is a resilience skill building challenge that y'all can kind of hop into and join on Discord. I'm going to show y'all just the kinds of things that y'all are doing here. So we developed these challenges to give y'all kind of like a structure and a way to do the things that are good for you. So this is a circles of influence diagram. This is a great way to like think about the things that shape your life and to really sort of understand them. Coping with context. So choose one trigger that regularly overwhelms you and make 2 survival plans. So this is what's really interesting is when we go through like feeling overwhelmed, we react very reflexively. So oftentimes the problem-solving circuit of the brain gets disabled when we feel overwhelmed because we don't have the space and time to like think about things in a big picture way. So you have to do the thinking ahead of time, which gets really challenging because it's hard to be motivated to think about things ahead of time unless they're like in your face. So this is a big reason why people sort of get overwhelmed over and over and over again. And there are a couple of cognitive skills that you can develop that'll help you deal with that stuff. So that's what these challenges are designed to help you do. And then this is another great example. So support your future self. So this person apparently like made muesli. I don't know how to pronounce it. Maybe I'm mispronouncing it, but that's great. Like, so you're like taking the time to make something healthy for yourself so that tomorrow morning when you wake up and you feel like eating something, there's something there for you. So make something unnecessarily beautiful. Cool. The anti-live, laugh, love. Craft a grounding phrase that speaks to your kind of mental chaos and what truly feels for you. Skip the toxic positivity and aim for what's grounding and authentic. And then environmental interventions. So here's like before and after. This is a big part of what we do here. We try to trick y'all into cleaning. So I was about to say trick y'all into streaming, but so the community challenge is like really awesome. I think we're 80 points away from our next unlock. So if y'all, I know it's kind of the end of May, but it's not too late to join. Every single thing that you do actually puts y'all into a raffle for like free stuff. So we had someone who just joined last week and submitted 5 things. They were one of the winners of the raffle. So it's not too late to join and get started. Just do something good for yourself. Last thing is that we do have a couple of promotions that end in 2 days. So we've got $25 off Dr. K's guide, $5 off of coaching per session, which ends up being about $100 off. And then we have a 5-day free trial on our membership platform. If y'all are interested in that stuff, we've got a lot of like community stuff and lectures and things like that. So check that stuff out. But without further ado, let's hop in. Okay. Give me a second. We have a very fancy overlay that hopefully works. There we oh, no, wait, this is the wrong one. There we go. Testing.
Okay, we're unmuted now.
Oh, okay, unmuted. So loud. Okay, hold on. I'm going to change your volume. Okay. Count to 5 for me.
1, 2,
Perfect.
3.
Awesome. Hello.
Andrea is still muted, I think.
GG. Oh, still muted.
It wouldn't be a Botez live stream without audio issues.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome. So,
Thank you for having us.
can we start with what do y'all go by? What should I call you today?
I go by Alex or Alexandra.
Okay.
And I go by Gremlin. Just kidding. I just go by Andrea or Andrea. Either way works.
Okay, I'm going to turn y'all down just a touch. It's so interesting because we just tested this like 10 minutes ago. Okay. So you said you go by Andrea, is that right?
Or Andrea.
Andrea, okay.
Everyone says it different ways, so whichever
Andrea.
way you'd like.
What's the right way?
My parents say Andrea, and that's what my sister says when she's angry. So there's really no right way because the American way is different. So.
And what's the original way? What culture, country, ethnicity, language?
We're Romanian, so
Okay.
we roll our R's. It's a Latin language.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so can y'all tell me a little bit? So I know I think I've met maybe Andrea before. I don't know if I've met Alex, but I feel like we met like a few years ago at the Streamies. But anyway, I don't know. Maybe we met.
I don't
Not
remember
sure
if we
which
went
one
to the
of us
Streamies.
it was.
I
but
don't think
feel
we
like
met.
I've seen you around. It may
Yeah.
have been me.
May have been you. So, yeah, can y'all tell me just a little bit about like, okay, so how did y'all get to be here? Like, what did y'all do? How did you get here? Y'all are like streamers. Y'all play chess. Like, tell me about that.
So I started streaming in college for fun. And then later on, I ended up going full time into it. And my
Okay.
sister, she was always very funny. So I would have her on as a guest
Very
stream
funny.
sometimes. And then the pandemic hit when she was supposed to go to college. And I was like, don't go to college. Come stream with me.
Nice.
And basically, she's never been to college since. At first, the parents were not very happy about it, but they accepted it over time.
Yeah, so to give my rendition of it, when I was supposed to go to college, it was right when our streaming boom was happening. So right at the beginning of the pandemic, my sister, she was at Stanford. She was streaming chess. Our parents are traditional immigrants, and my mom would be like, I don't know why she went to Stanford to just play chess on the internet with strangers. she was very confused. The ladies at church would always ask, and my mom would just lie sometimes and say she works in finance or something else. But then the pandemic happened, and she spent a lot of time at home, and our stream just started working together. And that year, I was like, well, what's the point of going to school if everything's online anyways? I have no clue what I want to study. So I moved with her for a couple months in New York. We butted heads a lot, but that was the beginning of Botez Live.
Okay, and what is Botez Live?
That is our channel.
Okay.
And what is it now? I would say it's our Twitch channel, it's our YouTube. We're also maybe changing some of the branding to Botez Sisters since we've been doing things more than just live, but that's all of what it encapsulates.
Cool. And so what's it like? So I noticed that, so, usually when we talk to people on the channel, we'll talk to like one person. Like sometimes we'll do something like a panel and stuff, but I'm curious, what's it like to be a streaming or a content creation duo?
Andrea, you start. I'm curious what you're going to say.
So at the beginning, well, obviously it had its ups and downs because we had an age difference. So I was fresh out of high school. Alex had a college degree. It took a little bit of maturing, but then after we got through that, I think we realized very quickly that this industry is very difficult and gets very lonely. And honestly, without the other one, I don't think we would have ever been able to go as far as we did in content. So obviously we're each other's number one supporters, and that goes both through like our individual projects and all the content we do together. And then of course it also entails that people will always compare us, often confuse us. I love getting comments on my DJ channel where they're like, oh, this girl's a DJ. I just watched her beat Magnus Carlsen. I'm like, that's not me, but I'll take the credit. So that's like the lighter side. Of course, there's more a comparison of like people always want to pin us by our looks and whatnot. We don't really focus on that, but that's just a result of being sisters on the internet.
Yeah. So can y'all tell me, so I have so many questions. So first question is, you said that y'all have like traditional immigrant parents. What does that mean?
I'll let Alex start.
It means they
There's lots
came
to answer.
in with certain values where my parents took a really big risk to come to the US and then later Canada. So for them, one of the things they really wanted for us growing up was stability. So like our parents were like, the dream job we could have had for our parents would be to be doctors. They
Or
wanted
engineers.
something, or no, actually Dad told me
Maybe.
not to become an engineer because he didn't think it was stable enough. He thought it was too hard to find a job. So they
That's
just
funny.
really liked medical field, and they're like, with medical field, you'll always have a job because there's always a need. So that was sort of their take. And I think for them, they saw all of the kids of the other parents do somewhat similar things like that. So to be more entrepreneurial or to be a content creator was definitely a little different than what they expected. And our parents are from Romania, for those of you asking. So they're Eastern European, which is a very
Yeah, and
particular type of immigrant.
just to add to it, I mean, the things that we appreciate a lot now as adults, I would also just say is we grew up a lot with European values. Like we grew up in a really poor apartment complex where everyone had just immigrated to Canada and everyone would help raise each other's children. So a lot of it was like just good mannerisms where like, you really care for other people. Some of it was, for example, our mom was always really frugal. That's something that now hasn't even changed. And like always asking the question, are you sure that the internet's not going to disappear and it's all going to come crashing down? So I would say
It's a
like,
valid
a
question.
lot more concerned, but also very loving and have a big European heart. So
Yeah, and even though our parents didn't have a lot when we were growing up, as in like they were definitely poor immigrants, they really valued education and family. So that's why our dad taught us both chess from a young age. It always really mattered to our parents, or at least my dad, that we did extremely well in school. So there was a lot of pressure there. And yeah, that was sort of how we grew
Yep.
up.
a lot of pressure
So
on
how did your
academics.
dad learn chess?
Our dad learned from our grandma. So in Romania, there's a really big chess culture. So it was one of those things that was sort of passed down from the generations.
Okay. And when did y'all start playing? Do both y'all play chess competitively?
Not really anymore competitively, as in like that's the number one priority. We grew up playing chess competitively growing up. I'm like, and you know, last year we were competing in tournaments again, but now definitely content is the biggest
Okay.
focus.
We were competitive from like 6 to age 18 because obviously in high school and getting into college, that's when I was still trying to qualify for Olympiads and whatnot. And then as soon as we started getting into content, we stopped competing, which was the plan anyways.
So so it sounds like your parents had, pushed y'all a fair amount. I don't know if that's fair to say.
My dad pushed me a lot in chess when I was a kid. Basically, he taught me when I was 6, and when I was 8, I won a national tournament. And then it was sort of this mentality that I was good at chess, so I should just focus on chess. So, like, I really liked gymnastics, but my dad said, well, you'll never be as good at gymnastics as you are at chess, so just focus on chess. And similar things with Andrea, she'll tell you that because she was really into dance.
Well, I was a second child, so I grew up with a bar graph on the fridge
Oh,
of
that was
Alex
bad.
and I's chess ratings at each age, which there was one year that I surpassed her, and then it was all downhill from there because, frankly, I wasn't as interested in chess. I had a lot more ADHD. I really enjoyed music and creating things, and I did not enjoy spending all my weekends locked in the chess club in the stinky, dark Portland chess club as much as I loved that place. So for me, it was a much more hate-love relationship with chess. Alex, I think, had a little bit more success, and she also traveled a lot more from chess. So a big part of her social life was with chess players as well, which is very much how she got into streaming.
So this.
Well, it's
Yeah, go-
deeper than that, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
no. Go. Tell me deeper.
I think so we moved from Canada when when I was 13 and Andrea was a lot younger, and I felt like I lost all of my friends that I grew up with because there is something special when you grow up in a community where you have a lot of people who share your culture. So there were a lot of Romanians where we grew up. And like other immigrants, and when we moved to the US, I definitely had a harder time making friends, and chess was this thing that I carried with me. And before I used to get a lot of like my happiness and validation from social groups, but when we moved, I couldn't have that anymore. So then I sort of started playing chess because it was something that I could get results, and then it would make me feel good about myself. So it was sort of a switch like that. And I was also less popular in high school than Andrea was, and a lot of my friends were in chess, so that was a big reason why I liked playing chess more than my sister, I think. It was funny in a way that it was less about the chess game and more about what it did for me in my life.
You have anything that you want to say, Andrea?
I wasn't necessarily more popular.
Sorry, look
Alex
me in the
just
eye
had
and tell
like
me
3
you weren't more
friends in high
popular.
school.
Okay.
I just had a couple more friends, but I wasn't like a popular girl. I compared to Alex.
Okay, let's relax.
Okay, what just happened?
I'm just trolling her, as I always do.
Okay, so this is okay. All right, so we could stop this at any point, but I'm gonna make things weird, or y'all. I
We're
know
weird.
you can't be right.
We can
So-
go
so
as weird as you.
Okay, so I know it's weird because you don't know what I'm gonna say. So this is really weird. Like it's cool. So I don't know if y'all noticed, but y'all do this really interesting thing where you guys like bounce things off of each other. So one of y'all will answer a question. So like it's weird because when I say something, one of y'all will start talking, or you'll pitch things over to the other person. And then like one person will say something, like y'all see that, and then y'all make a lot of internal comparisons. So like Alex will say like, oh yeah, like I wasn't as popular as Andrea was. And like, so it seems like you guys were like literally compared. And then, but y'all have this really interesting dynamic where y'all like bounce things. Does that kind of make sense? I feel like I'm getting 50% of an answer from each of you.
We're very well PR trained, Dr. K. Just kidding. Trolling.
Y'all get what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Or
We definitely bounce things off a lot from each other because
Yeah.
we also obviously know a lot about
Yeah.
the other person where we think they're gonna go. And the comparison, I think I'm just sort of trying to put that in the framework of chess and like why it was a bigger part in one of our lives than the other.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes my sister knows me better than I know myself.
Sure.
So, like, sometimes I'll eat a food and she'll be like, I'm going to predict what your reaction is before you eat it. And I'll eat it. And she's like, that's exactly what I thought. The first therapy session I went to, she was like, but tell me about you. I know enough about your sister and your mom. She's like, I don't know anything about who you are. You're just talking about your sister. I'm like, but yeah, my sister's everywhere. Like, I do everything with her, which, it's partly like a joke. But yeah, number one, we know each other really well, and also we do a lot of content together. So like these stories, we like to tell them together. So it's a mix of both.
yeah, that's so interesting. So it sounds like that works very well for y'all.
Yeah, so except when we have our petty arguments, otherwise it's 99.9% flawless.
Maybe like 98, but we do our best.
Yes, that's so interesting because like you did it again, right? So one person says 99.9, next person says 98. Y'all have a great rapport. But do y'all ever have non-petty arguments?
Not very often. Occasionally. I mean, obviously, like I've known her all her life. We've had some serious debates over time.
Yeah, I would say maybe when I was younger, they were more serious, but honestly, now it's generally just petty stuff. Because obviously we worked with each other on so many
Yeah.
projects that usually when we start arguing, we're just like, okay, you're really annoying to work with, but who else would you want to work with? Nobody else. And then we just like scowl, and then we're like, okay, let's go to Trader Joe's, and then we make amends, and that's usually how it goes.
Cool. So so I have kind of like a curiosity about this, which like y'all let me know if this like works for you for a direction. So y'all seem to be really good siblings. And I know there's like a PR aspect, but I don't think it's just PR. I think it seems like you guys
We have no PR. I was
yeah.
trolling. Our PR team.
So what I'm curious is like how, right? So when I look at the world today, I don't see many siblings who are as close as y'all are. And what I'm really curious, like, because generally speaking, so advice that I've gotten is like never go into business with family. Like, don't do it, right? Like that's really common. Like, don't ever go into business with family. So there's like conflicting relationships and like how do you value the business versus the personal relationship? And there's a conflict of interest. So how are y'all such good sisters?
So I think first we have to give some credit to our parents and our family. Our family is extremely close. Like everybody really loves each other. And even if we don't see each other all the time, we basically have a good relationship with everyone in our family, and that's always been a top priority for us. Like even when our parents would always say like it's just most important for us that you two get together. Um, and then I think the biggest challenge between me and my sister when we weren't as close was because I was a little bit older, so I went off to college and I never came back, and she was in high school. So then I would see her a lot less and we'd have less in common. Um, but now that we've spent so much time together, it's really moved beyond that, where it's like, yeah, she's my sister, but she's also my best friend, and she's also my roommate, and she's also my business partner, and I have no idea how we haven't killed each other yet, but I'm genuinely impressed by like how well we've been able to make things work. And Andrea, I'll let you add stuff too, because I talked a lot.
Yeah, no, I think the majority of it, honestly, just our Romanian roots. And like we said from the beginning, like one thing, the older and older I get and the more time I spend in Europe versus in America, is just I really started appreciating the values from our parents. And like our dad was so loving. He had a great sense of humor. He was always like a giant social butterfly at the chest room and sweet talking to everyone. So we're raised by number one, a really supportive father. Our mother's the same. Like family is always number one to her. And we were just always really loved. And I just think we reciprocated that for each other, and to us, our top priority is like always going to be family and our family's health, and of course, you know, our work stuff. But I really just think we got it carried on from our parents.
That's so interesting because I think right now, you know, what I see, and I'd love to get y'all's thoughts on this. So what I see is like people don't prioritize family in our society today, right? So actually, like the most of the time, like if you go on, I don't know if y'all browse Reddit, but that's my poison of choice. You know, if you look at things like relationship advice, like subreddits, or you see things like TikTok or whatever, I don't spend a whole lot of time there, but like, you know, I think there's generally a sentiment of like, fuck your family, like bluntly, right? Like if you know, if your family, like if they're not respecting your boundaries, like cut them out, like go no contact, go low contact, like people can be narcissistic. You got to look out for yourself first. What your parents want for you isn't as important as what you want for yourself. I think there's a very, very like independence or individual like prioritization. Are y'all kind of seeing that too?
I think we had some of that where, you know, I made some decisions about my career that my parents didn't support right away. But eventually, our parents have always come to support whatever decision we make, even if it's tough at first. And, you know, when Andrea moved in with me when she was 18, at first it was really difficult because she was just out of high school. She had never had a boss. And like I was teaching her the ropes, and sometimes it was really difficult to work with. So it's not like we haven't had times where it clashes with our
Yeah.
individuality. I think it's just one, our family is so supportive, and eventually, like, we can talk through anything, and like I know if we butt heads, we'll always figure it out. But it's not like we haven't had our challenges. We just
Yeah.
sort of worked through everything long term. And yeah, I guess it is easy to take it for granted sometimes, like when you grow up with parents and like a sibling who really loves you and you have a really good relationship. But I know that it's very special, and I'm really it's one of the things that I think I'm most grateful for.
I don't get the sense that you take it for granted at all. Quite the
Okay, that's
opposite.
good.
I think it's very clear that y'all are like, like you've talked basically from the first moment about the value of growing up with the family that you grew up with. I mean, it sounds like it really is number one. What I'm
Mhm.
kind of curious about is like how it seems like y'all's family prioritizes family over individuals. And even when the way that, and I think it's interesting because you said when I made some decisions that my family wasn't happy with, so even from your parents' perspective, they're prioritizing family, which is why they come around. Does that kind of make sense? Right? So
Yeah,
you're like,
yeah, it
okay, I
does.
want to start streaming, and Andrea wants to come in, or like we want to live together or whatever, and they were like not super happy about Andrea not going to medical school. Like, oh my God, ruining your life, but they kind of come around. And I was just kind of curious, like, if y'all are seeing similar trends of like individualism over family or over the collective, the board collective. But uh,
Like, just in
yeah,
general?
just in general, do y'all see that? Or maybe it's just the parts of the internet rabbit hole that I go down.
Define individualism. So by that you mean just like I don't need anyone else. I've got
No,
myself.
that the top
Or
priority
what
is
is the
me.
mindset?
Right. So
Ah,
if people like, if my family is not supportive of what I am doing, like it's kind of like I think there's a very large mentality. I see this a lot in dating too, of kind of like my way or the highway. I think a lot of people will talk about like red flags that I think are like normal and I don't think are red flags.
Mhm.
Like my wife prioritized my career for like a solid decade and arguably still does. And so that's something that like as a professional, accomplished woman, like you don't sacrifice your career for the sake of your husband. That's like a big red flag. But I think that, we tend to be pretty like family oriented too. But I'm
Mhm.
noticing that there's like a trend towards individual comes first over family. And I'm just curious if y'all have seen that trend as well. And if not, like, not a big deal. We can move on to something else.
I'll answer. I can't tell if Alex is frozen or stuck in hard thought, but it looks like she
I think
froze.
I think she's frozen.
I'll
Maybe
let
she's st-
Alex I'll let Alex debug, but it's not necessarily that I noticed the trend, and I hate to keep being like American versus European culture, but again, like there's so many being in, the LA industry and experiencing so many different circles. I don't feel like it's necessarily a trend. I just feel like it really depends on the group of people and
Mm,
just the way our parents were raised. Like we're also number one so blessed that both my sister and we have the same incentive, same values of like working really hard, but also spending time with loved ones, taking care of ourselves, taking care of others. I think like number one, we're blessed that neither of us have to deal with like a really difficult mental illness. Like so many of my best friends' siblings are like in a mental hospital and they have to like fight through so many more things that Alex and I obviously like we were academic from the beginning. We had our goals. And we were also just blessed to have such an amazing family. So I think for us, it's just honestly, I'm also, yeah, like I don't even ever think of it more as a trend. I just see like, okay, there's groups of people who don't value family values and aren't as compassionate for others and tend to stray away from those as much. So I can't say if it's a trend or more just like people who haven't really um, been raised the right way. Don't know if that's a good answer, but Alex is back. Hi,
Hi, I'm
chat. Yeah,
back,
I'm reading you
sorry.
guys.
no problem. I was just wondering if y'all had noticed a trend towards individualism.
I haven't really noticed it or thought about it as much, and it may be one of those things where because it hasn't been an issue in my life, I don't really seek more information about it on the
Hmm.
internet. But like at least the trend towards individualism that I do see is like people being more comfortable with themselves and like finding these small niches in the internet where they can truly be themselves.
Oh, but the one thing I would add is I would definitely say that, especially as we started, the first couple of years of Botez Live, we we're both two chess streaming sisters. also always being the younger sister, it was definitely difficult to find my own sense of individuality and like my own personality. Sorry, I didn't sleep very much. Especially because I'm always compared with her. We have a chess brand. She's better at chess, better than I will ever be. So it took many years for me to figure out what actually makes me me, that is not me trying to uphold this image that my sister and the brand that we built together. So I think there's difficulty for sure in finding your own sense of individuality, but not in the terms of like being selfish and putting yourself always over others. That was just not a value.
Thanks for answering that. So what's it like to be compared all the time? Y'all both get compared to each other?
All the time, yeah.
Like what kind of comparisons do people make?
Like people will say one person is more attractive or one person is more smart, or they'll put one person up at the expense of putting another person down.
Or my favorite one is Alex has lost a lot of weight. It must be because Andrea's eating all her food or something. Sometimes it's like random things like, oh, one of them's overweight now. And I was like, hey man, leave me alone. I have my snack. But like, it's really obviously ridiculous stuff. But like, are people, even in this stream, I've seen so many, comments about lip filler, which has never happened, but there's just so many things, like, people always want to look like, oh, Botox sister's got plastic surgery. One of the sister looks too old. One of the younger sister doesn't look enough like a younger. So it's always the most ridiculous thing. But of course, it is the internet. So people are allowed to comment on your appearance as much as they want.
Yeah, and part of it is, I guess, the comparison, and part of it is just like people leaving nasty comments on the internet, which obviously is just always going to be a
There's
thing.
people being nasty.
Yeah. So how do y'all deal with, because it sounds like the comparison started when y'all were young on your fridge with the ELO ratings on chess whatever.
That was more the academic of Alex is the poster child. You must get into a really great school because of your sister. And then obviously the internet just put it always like looks and what they define as smarts, and obviously what they know about us. So
what's it like being the younger? So I mean, I can sort of relate. So my brother graduated high school at the age of 16, and was a triple major in college. Ended up going to Harvard for grad school, and then went to law school, and was managing.
You're the younger sibling.
I'm the less successful one.
Let's go! High five! Just kidding.
Right?
Yeah.
So I it was like I have my own experience of it, but I'm curious, what was it like growing up as the younger sibling of someone who's like a national chess
Very
champion at the age of 8 and goes to Stanford?
Yeah,
and then also is blowing up as a streamer.
Yeah, I would say the hardest years was the first years we started streaming. I was also like 15, 16 when I first started becoming a streamer. And I would always just get comments that I'm stupid and I'm a bimbo. And again, I was just a young girl. Like, I like being loud and making jokes, and I had never been a streamer before. So, I'd let my silly side out more, and people would think that was all there was to me. So it was often just feeling like I'll never be as intelligent, as wise as my sister, who's the chess master with the Stanford degree. And a lot of that honestly just came from the internet and me being pretty young, where I hadn't really figured out my own identity yet, and people were telling me what to believe about myself. So I don't even think that came as much from my sister, but it was definitely like easier for people to egg me on because I was, the dumber Botez or whatnot.
Is it okay if Alex, is it okay if I talk to Andrea for a couple minutes?
Yeah, go for it.
You can chime in if you want to. So you said that it took you a while to figure out what makes you, right? Like,
yes.
What was that process like?
Honestly, a lot of it happened when I started taking risks and doing things outside of the regular routine of streaming. Because when I dove into streaming with my sister, we just became full-time streamers for a year, 2 years. And of course, you have to, there's many moments you have to ride the highs and grind and stream a lot more hours. But I realized like my strengths aren't necessarily always just being live in front of the camera. And that only happened because of like a very bizarre series of events. For example, I had 2 boxing fights. first the chess boxing and then a real physical boxing fight where I had 6 months to train. I had to train 7 days a week for 3 months. I had to cut out everything. And then from boxing, I was like, oh, if I can fight a woman in front of 10,000 people and do this, I can actually do anything that I want. What is it that I actually want? That for me ended up being music. But none of that would have happened if I didn't give myself a break to be like, I really love chess. Chess is what made us and what our community is, but I don't think that what I want to do every day is be live and play online chess. I still want to make chess content, but I want to make stuff that feels more impactful, that I can feel like I'm actually adding something to it. So much of, being the chess streamer was you're just doing trends and doing more quantity over quality. And I felt like, sure, our videos are going viral because we're doing trash talking matches and whatnot. But so can every other chess girl can do this. It's not really out of like my own art or because I'm special. So yeah, I was taking a break from that.
Yeah, so I'm noticing, it's interesting the language that you use, because I'm noticing that there's like a fulfilling expectation, right? Which is like moving kind of like upward in this direction where there's like a target that you're trying to hit. And your journey was a little bit about, you said kind of what you can add. So like visually in my mind, I kind of saw like, okay, there's this other path where like you're kind of forging your own path and you're adding something else. You're not just like living up to expectations.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of those expectations is just also, which Alex and I like helped each other do this direction, is realizing we want to step out of the box of being just online chess streamers. And that's a really scary risk to take. Like, you're technically leaving your main job and you're taking a risk to try other things. And we did that together as well, which definitely helped us both.
What was that like?
Alex, should I speak about when we made I'll let Alex start this.
No, you go. Continue with what you want.
Okay. I'm trying to think. So I don't want to say it was our decision to quit Twitch, because like we still do occasionally stream, but obviously we do not stream as much as we used to. And that was mainly because we just felt like we did all that we could in this type of content. And the things that we really enjoyed, for example, podcasts, is finding really interesting guests and like preparing questions and connecting with people and learning about them. And there's so much content on the internet. Well, I think one thing is like you should enjoy and be proud of the content that you make. And I realized like the more low hanging fruit type of chess content wasn't content I was proud of nor enjoyed or wanted to consume myself. So we decided together that we are going to step away from Twitch to focus on our YouTube. And, numbers might be kind of dead for a year. And we're taking little risks to keep the ball moving. We always compare ourselves to cockroaches and we say, we just survive and you keep going through more seasons. And that's what it was. Like the first chess goes through so many booms. So it was like 2-3 years of just surviving the booms and adapting when we finally decided to step away. And for me, that was also when I got to really commit more time to my passion project, which is music. Alex had similar experience with her poker projects. But together we just decided Botez Live is more than just chess. It's actually about our sibling personalities and us as people and connecting with people, which we do best through podcast content, other content that we've been planning. But necessarily it was just the decision to be more than just the chess YouTuber or chess streamer.
That's so cool. What's up with the poker, Alex?
I actually learned poker from my dad as well when I was a kid, and then I would always play for fun, and then I started getting invited to poker tournaments when they were looking for creators, and they're like, oh, she plays chess, she'll probably like poker. So I ended up, and I'm still somewhat playing poker as part of my profession now.
Cool. And so
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, what's it like being the golden child, elder sibling, 8-year-old
Yes,
chess
please,
champion?
shining light.
It's really interesting because I don't think I ever saw myself as the golden child. I really struggled with self-esteem when I was in high school and even in college. And like I would look at myself and I would think like I'm not very smart, I'm not very attractive. So like I guess I just need to work really hard because that's the only way I'll have a chance at a happy life. So I never really saw it like that.
Mhm.
And even when Andrea came and I like took her under my wing, you get a lot of comments about people who are like, "Oh, like she's the prettier sister and this and that." And it's like I was always getting compared in that way also, or she's funnier. It's the same way we always get comparisons. Um so, like being the golden child, it had a lot of expectations because I think my parents were harder on me than they were on Andrea, just because you lose energy as you're older. Like you crack the whip for the older child, and then you see they turn out somewhat okay, and then the other kid has it a little bit easier. But part of it actually is, I had initially gotten a scholarship to the University of Texas for chess. And then this happened when I was 15. So then my parents stopped like putting pressure on me in school because they're like, oh, like she already has it covered. But my dream was always to get into Stanford. And I was like, if I do, like, can I go there instead? So when I got into Stanford, my mom was like, your dream, our nightmare. Because it's just so much more expensive to go to
Mm.
Stanford than a free school, even though we got financial aid and a lot of it covered. Even
Mom
paying,
cried when she decided to go to Stanford. Like, imagine not tears of joy,
no,
tears
it
of
was pretty
upset
bad.
that Alex isn't taking a free scholarship at UT and going to Stanford.
Yeah, so and that was really tough. And then the deal was that like my parents would help me pay for college partly, but then I would help Andrea after.
Which
Um,
I forget about that. You technically owe me college money. I would like to cash out on
oh
that too.
please, oh please.
I think I've taken enough snaps.
So no, and then even when I brought in Andrea, like I always thought she was really talented on content and stuff like that, but there was like a lot of things that she didn't understand yet because she was so young. Now she's absolutely grown into that role where it felt like a lot of times at the start, again, not now, I would have to do a lot of the work and the responsibility and then also share the credit. And to me, that was like a very painful thing internally because it's like to grind something from 0 to 1 when you don't know it's gonna work and then like bring in someone after like you've already gone viral and now all of a sudden you're sharing credit was tough at the time, but like still I was like, I don't care, it's my sister, it's my family, and like I know eventually she's gonna grow into this role. But it was basically like always having this feeling of a lot of pressure and a lot of my self-worth tied into external validation. And especially when I started streaming, like it was pressure because I had just graduated from Stanford. My startup had just failed, and I went full time into streaming chess to the point where like one of my investors was like, Alex has to do real life last time. Alex has to do real life eventually, or my friends would be like, "You're just going back into chess." Like it just I would take a lot of big risks and get sort of criticized, and then I'd have this feeling internally that like I will do whatever it takes to get success, and then I would make that my gold star. But then I sort of trained myself over the years to be like only happy if achieving, which has sort of caught up to me and like made it more difficult later on.
That's so. I'm enjoying this conversation so much. I think it's y'all seem to be super aware of your internal journey. Like,
Yes, I've spent a lot of time talking with ChatGPT about it.
really? What's that like?
Oh, for sure. Chad is the best therapist I've ever had. Like I'm really serious about it, and I know part of it is because I really wanted to do the self work myself and gave it a lot of data. Andrea knows I love Chad. That's why she's smiling, I think.
Yeah, y'all are just so in tune with each other. It's like wild. It's like you make it's so weird. It's like when you're speaking, you're looking at her. It's almost like she is a source of information about you to you. She's like the
It's
original
weird
ChatGPT.
because like I feel like often I know what she's thinking, and I feel like she knows what I'm thinking too.
Yeah. How do
Yeah.
y'all understand that?
Go
Well,
ahead, Andrea.
I mean, also I'd say like in the last 2 years, we've both spent a lot of time, not to sound like an alpha Chad bro on self growth, but especially my sister, like she's committed a lot of time just to number one, improving her health. And with that came mental health. So I think it was a big priority for us in the last year, which especially
Sorry.
maids, especially as you could hear from Alex's story, how much she tied her self-value to work, and that work always came over happiness. So that last year of self-growth, which I saw my sister do, and also often was there for her journey and supporting her, was a very big change compared to how she's lived her life.
Used
I
to
think
scare Andrea at first when she
she was
started working
terrible.
with me.
Yeah.
How-
She
how
was
so?
a machine. I mean, like Alex said, all that mattered was that she is successful in work and she would sacrifice so much to get
Like
there.
what?
And Alex can explain this maybe better in her words.
Anything, health, social life, anything. Work was always number one priority.
So can we dig into that for a second?
Sure.
Okay. I won't be as good as Chat GPT, but
Don't worry,
You
you're
have
not
a high
getting
bar. No, just
yeah.
kidding.
Tell me about it. I have to live up to all these expectations. Chat GPT is my younger sister who is now
Don't worry,
outshining
I'll
me in so
input
many
this.
ways.
I'll input this conversation into chat so we could discuss it later.
Great. So you said that when you were growing up, you struggled with like self-esteem. It sounds like in middle school and high school. What was that like? What was going on there?
I never had self-esteem issues before I was 13. The self-esteem issues, I think, and also like feeling depressed happened after I moved from Canada. So I do feel like a big part of that was just losing my friend group and the people I really liked hanging out with and just not finding that again maybe until like college or even after.
Mhm.
And then struggling with self-esteem, it was just it's just tough. You just feel bad about yourself all the time. Like you feel like you're not good enough, you feel like you're not attractive enough, you feel like you're not smart enough. Um and the only way I could make those fears feel better was by over-indexing on self-improvement and being like, I might not be smart enough now, I might not be attractive enough now, but like if I work hard enough, I'll get there. So like thinking that hard work could solve everything. And that would genuinely usually make me feel better. But like sometimes in high school, I'd get really depressed on Fridays because I would grind really hard in the week and Friday nights would be a little bit slower. And when I wouldn't have something to work on, I would just feel really empty.
And yet, oh, sorry. I
Yeah,
just
no.
wanted to chime in on that because the self confidence thing for me, like my sister growing up was always the most beautiful person. My mom and my sister, I remember when I was a little girl, I would draw them in a journal and say the most beautiful women in the world. And I genuinely, as much as I say this to Alex and sometimes she thinks I'm trolling, I do believe that. And I think she's one of by far the smartest, kindest people I know. And it would make me so shocked and be so hard to believe the things that she would not be confident in about herself. Like whether it would be a video and she's like, I absolutely hate how I look. And it's really hard when you're, constantly filming and you're like feel physical pain when you have to see what you look like on camera. Well, that's another conversation. Or sometimes it would be Alex is preparing for something that's like a high level conversation and she would always think she's not smart enough. And the things that she would doubt herself in, I just couldn't understand how, because obviously I know her so well. I also, not to play therapist, but I think I know another reason where that developed, but I'm not going to say it. But I think I know where. But all I wanted to say is that Alex was, to me, always the greatest role model. And the things that I just couldn't wrap my head around it. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that her journey, and that was much harder than it probably seems just in words.
I appreciate that. Thank you, sister.
Can I think for a second?
Yeah, take your time. I'm reading the chat. Andrea's vocab is troll. Actually, okay, I'm going to turn on the air conditioning. One second.
Can you
It's
all
getting
turn
hot in
off the
here.
chat? Is that
Oh, do you
doable?
not want us to read chat?
I think
I
I
only
should
Yeah,
read chat.
Chat has been distracting me a little because people keep commenting on what's wrong with my lips and like, bro, I just woke up a little inflamed today.
Yeah,
I'm gonna turn
I
my
would.
AC
I mean,
on.
I don't read chat when I'm talking to humans.
Yeah, no, that's better.
Yeah. So interesting. So when you were you used hard work as an antidote to the way that you felt about yourself. Did you actually feel better when you would work hard?
Yeah, I mean, because I just started doing really well in school. So even if I didn't, in school and in chess, so like even if I didn't feel smart, like I would get really good grades or I would start doing really well in chess tournaments. And then that would give me external validation.
And then, so then when you got into Stanford and your mom was upset, what was that like?
Well, I was still it was my dream and I thought there was no way in hell that I was gonna get in, but I might as well try. I think it was probably one of the happiest moments of my life to this day. Like the high from seeing that I got in was crazy. And of course, I felt really bad, and it caused like 6 months of fighting with me and my parents about it, and like sort of tensions. There was a moment, which never mind, I don't want to call my mom
Sure.
out because I understand why she was stressed. Like
The
again,
cup
when you're
story, isn't
the
it?
cup story, Andrea, but let's not get into
Let me
the
tell
cup
the cup
story.
story. Let me
Oh.
tell the cup story.
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
Wait,
Maybe
hold
not.
on.
Here's
Yeah,
not the platform.
maybe
Sorry,
maybe
keep
not.
going. Sorry.
So
Sorry,
hold on.
Continue.
Has
Sorry.
this story been told before? Is it out there?
I don't know. Probably not.
Okay,
It's
So
not.
because once y'all say it on the internet, there's no
Yeah, no,
taking
you're
it back,
Yeah, you're right. No cup story.
Thanks,
right?
Dr. Kate.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
So like, let's
funny,
just
but you're right.
like, I totally get it, and I know she's excited, and you want. I see this whole fucking telepathic umbilical cord shit y'all have going on with each other's faces, and you can, yeah, but let's not do that.
Yeah. Saved.
Saved.
We all laugh about it now. But where were we?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's like, you know, it's interesting because it sounds like y'all. What I think is what I like about y'all's representation of growing up and stuff is that it wasn't like there wasn't. I mean, it sounds like there was a pretty serious disagreement between you and your parents about where you should go. You know, y'all mentioned several times that your parents are immigrants, so like money was not easily available necessarily, right? So that there were very real. And at the end of the day, like, how much of a difference does it make? Like, fulfilling your dreams versus like stability. Like, you know, you'll get stability if you graduate from the University of Texas, I imagine, I hope.
Of course, yeah.
And so what I'm curious about is like when you got into Stanford, like what made it so happy for you?
It had seemed like one of those things that I would never be good enough for, and I was always like a high achiever. Like I always wanted to be the best in anything I did, and eventually school became something competitive for me also. Like when I won my full ride scholarship at 15, I was like, I don't want to spend the rest of my life pushing wood trying to beat another person. Like how do I channel this into something bigger? It was always about like leveraging into the biggest possible thing. And I saw university as that. And I thought, like, you either get into like Harvard or Stanford or one of these schools where you have the crazy network and that gives you a huge chance for the rest of your life, or you go to a state school and like hope for the best. And like for what it's worth, I got rejected by Harvard, I got rejected by UPenn. Somehow I got into Stanford. So it's not like I got into all these top schools. Honestly, it's still crazy to this day that I got in. But I just knew that getting into Stanford was something that would open a door of opportunities that I could then continue to be on like this hamster wheel of being the best version that I could be.
And so when did you start to, so it sounds like you're not so much driven by external validation anymore.
Well, I still want to be the best at everything I do. I'm working on enjoying the process now and just really enjoying what I've done. But like there is still something in me when I wake up and I'm like, no, I want it all. I want to do this and this and this, and like I also want to be healthy, and I also want to find a partner. I also want to start a family eventually. And like it's this like extremely high bar setting thing for me.
Why are you working on that?
Working on not being tied to external validation.
Yeah. You said you're working on something. What are you working on? Let's start there.
Basically, because I want to try. Whenever I hit something and it's external validation, I move on immediately to the next goal, and it usually doesn't make me happy. I think like too much ambition can be a bad thing, and like eventually you have something's got to give. Like, do you really want to prioritize health and family, or do you want to prioritize your career? And as a woman, that's a lot harder. So I think the reason I'm trying to get less tied into it is just because I don't think it's sustainable for long. And like I've sacrificed my health before, but like eventually you can't keep doing that.
Okay. So I'm kind of curious. You mentioned family and relationships. Do y'all mind if I ask y'all a couple questions about that? Because I know that this can also be dangerous territory for women on the internet. So I'm curious.
Tell you if not.
Yeah. So like when y'all are so connected and roommates and BFFs and work together, what happens when y'all date someone? Like either of you, I mean, obviously not together.
Well, we end up either really liking or not liking that person, but like long term, I think it's important that we both like whoever the other person is dating. Otherwise, maybe there's something off. And usually, when my sister has not liked someone, she's been right.
Whoever the other one dates shall be the best friend of both of us, because Alex and I are best friends until the end of time. And if we are not getting along to the same extent, that means that there's something off about him. And so far, my theory has always been true. But also goes really great ways when we find someone when one of us has someone we really like and we're like, they're a really, really good person, we really enjoy them, usually so does the other person.
Okay. That's interesting because, in Indian culture, we have like kind of this like saying that my wife's number one ally should be my brother. So like if there's ever conflict between my wife and I, my brother should default to taking her side. So we've got like this thing where it's interesting because I think Indian dynamics are a little bit different or culturally because we live in joint families and stuff, or we used to. We don't do that anymore. Tried it for a couple of years, but it's so interesting. So it sounds like that isn't really a problem. So it sounds like people don't really come between y'all, and you trust each other in terms of if one of y'all is like, hey, this person is a little bit sus. Maybe you don't realize it right away, but it turns out that your sibling is correct.
Now we do. It's taken some time to get here, but now we are at that stage. And yeah, it's awesome when you like the person your sibling is dating and they do become like one of your best friends too. And like sometimes I would be careful to not get attached to anybody who Andrea's seeing romantically, because I'm like, oh, I have a new friend and now they're gone.
But yeah, the guys I brought, at least they were good friends. But I feel like the family hunch, if your family does not really get along with the person you're seeing, to me it's always the number one red flag that there's something that is not going to be compatible long term with that person.
Yeah, agreed. Like seeing somebody who doesn't respect my parents or treat them kindly, it has been a deal breaker before.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So it sounds like it's not like, there's a certain amount of bodyguard element, but it really sounds like y'all have found a good equilibrium to where you trust each other's judgment. You kind of ended up, I think I imagine.
It's really just wanting the best for the other person and knowing that love can sometimes blind them. So like, when Andrea's with someone who treats her really well, I just am really happy about it. And if somebody was treating my sister poorly, like I could kill him. I mean, I wouldn't, but I could.
Yeah.
And I'd get away with it, but I wouldn't.
Yeah. Overachieving. You'd be good at it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So is there anything that we've kind of like, I really appreciate, like, I've got a couple other questions for y'all, but is there anything in particular that y'all want to talk about? Anything that y'all are curious about, or anything you want to share more about? Anything that you're interested in?
Go ahead, Andrea.
I had a question for you, Dr. K. So, Dr. K, correct? Is that what people call you or no?
What?
Is that correct? Dr. K?
Yeah, you can call me Dr. You can call me Alok if you want. It's just,
Alok.
it's easier to pronounce.
So, I've been diagnosed with ADHD, but however, my sister, she has not been. And there's been
I know where you're going with this.
Diagnosis that we haven't gotten to properly test yet. And I wanted to ask if you could help us figure it out.
Okay, help you figure out what?
I'm partly trolling. I don't think I'll go through with it unless Alex.
So what Andrea is referring to is that I have had a few people in my life suggest that I might have autism.
Many people.
I might have autism.
Okay.
And we actually met up with one of my friends who is also female, and she did end up being diagnosed with autism really late in her life. And it's interesting because she was never somebody I would have thought is on the spectrum, because you sort of have these preconceived notions. And I know that with women, you tend to mask it a lot more. But for her, seeing her get her diagnosis and understand herself a lot better, and like even like sometimes just like realizing that like she can get overstimulated and does need more space, and like is better able to take care of herself because she has this diagnosis. So that sort of made me open to trying to do like some kind of test, but I know it's one of those things that's so complex and it shows up differently in each person that I don't even know how you're supposed to test for it or if it's even helpful to do something like that.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I have a lot of thoughts. What's your question?
My question is, one, do you actually think it's helpful for people, particularly women, to get a diagnosis, whether it's ADHD or autism? And two, do you really trust the results of the test?
So let's start with number 2 first.
Mm-hmm.
Can I think for a second, actually?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a loaded question. Take your time.
What's loaded about it?
Oh, I just think it's a topic that generally a lot of people think about, but not a lot of people speak about on the internet, obviously for comfort reasons. So I think it's a topic that helps a lot of people if spoken about, but people tend not to, obviously, for personal reasons.
Okay. What do you so can I ask you some questions before I answer your questions?
Mm-hmm.
Why do people think that Alex may be on the spectrum?
Can you answer, Andrea?
Sorry, I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry, that question just made me laugh because I thought of all the funny stories that Alex said. Okay, like Alex said, so like I would say there's close people around me who have been diagnosed, and obviously it is so complex, like Alex is saying, that you really cannot put it into a box. Like I don't want to say there's so many different types. I'm so not well educated about speaking about this, so I'm not going to go into that. But mainly I would say I don't want to say her hyper focus, because that to me, well, hyper focus I think maybe can kind of go into both buckets. There's some moments where there's like, it's funny enough, usually it's just like and sometimes I'm wrong, I would say in romantic scenarios where Alex is just like cannot read a social sign. She's like, I don't think this guy likes me. I'm like, Alex, it's like as clear as day. So sometimes I'd say small social cues, but maybe that's also tied into the other things. And then second, I would just say like her hobbies, obviously, like Alex is, when she's into something, whether it's chess or whether it's poker, she is so hyper focused. And that's obviously how she's gotten really far. So those are the two surface level, but like on the social things, I think it's also just our friends who are diagnosed in some complex form of it have also similarities.
Like what?
I feel like Alex is just better to speak to that, to be honest.
I think some of it is like getting it's almost like introverted behavior, where if like there are too many people, like I was talking to one of my friends who is diagnosed, and like she sometimes needs to go in a bathroom and stay there for a little bit if she's somewhere with a lot of people, because like she gets overwhelmed by all the social interaction. And I'd been doing that for years. I was like, that's not like, I thought that's just a normal thing.
That's a good one. Like,
Or some
we both, sorry, I don't want to cut you off. Like, we both definitely need alone time to recharge. But sometimes it'd even be like, my mom is visiting. She's like, oh, like, I want to hang out with your sister. But Alex sometimes needs, I'd say, more space to recharge social batteries, which is what we heard from other friends with diagnosed, that is something that is related to being on the spectrum, whether it is or it's not.
Yeah, the hyperfixation thing is also very real. Like usually, like if I am interested in a topic, like it's jarring to take myself out of the focus, and it's actually hard to do that. Or I'll sometimes take things very literally, or with social cues, I will like translate them logically in my head, other than like thinking that they're necessarily coming naturally. So like sort of a mix of things like that.
Okay. So a couple of questions for you. Alex, do you get way angrier on the inside than it seems like on the outside?
Usually if I'm angry internally with a game, it's really easy to tell, but that's usually because like if I'm playing chess, I don't have time to hide my face because I'm in the moment with chess. If something does make me upset, I do usually feel it more internally than I'll show externally. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so there's not a discrepancy between what you feel on the inside and what you show on the outside.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Okay. Okay.
I would say Alex, and I've heard this from our best friends, our roommates, is the scariest person when she's mad because she doesn't say anything.
Okay.
She's just silent and you can see it. So to me, I would think that's an internal thing, but like no one wants to upset Alex, not because she's ever gonna like yell at you or be mean, but because you don't know what's going on inside because on the outside there's nothing. And like to me, I'd rather have someone like show, but so I don't know if that could be related. Which, yeah.
So, Alex, I know this is going to sound weird.
Mhm.
So, inside you can be a very difficult place to exist,
Oh, I know that.
right?
Don't need to tell me that.
And like it's like really hard to live on the inside, all the parts that we can't see.
Mhm.
It's really hard. And it's also really normal. Like it probably took you a while to figure out like other people don't exist. Like I don't think Andrea exists that way. You know what I mean? You'll kind of get what I'm saying? Like the two of y'all, even though you're very similar and things like that, the way that you live on the inside, I know people make lots of comparisons and shit like that, and I guess I'm playing into that shit too, which by the way is something that y'all do for each other.
For sure.
That's really interesting. So I think it's also like it's interesting because if you are on the spectrum, I think Andrea is 50% of your masking. So I don't know if
Interesting.
I don't know
What
if
does
that makes
that mean
sense.
exactly?
So I think you rely on her, right, to like do certain things that are really hard for you that you just don't. It's just comes so naturally to her. She got
Certain
some
social
weird,
interactions.
yeah,
I'm
like
like, oh,
intuitions, and you're like, I don't know what the fuck to do, and she just like, la, 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 la,
So she
I'm
leads
in,
me
I'm coming
forever.
in, and
This is so
it's all
sweet. I'm
good.
your other half.
Yeah,
on the
right. So
spectrum.
like
Just
you
kidding.
really rely. Like sure, you've been the older sister in many ways, but I think many times like she's been older than you. She just gets shit that you don't get and you don't understand. Like you've tried to figure it out and you've tried to study it and you've tried to logic it
for
out.
sure. There's certain social interactions, and I see how Andrea does, and I'm like, that's crazy.
Yeah, right. So like it and okay, so okay,
Chat. Oh, sorry. I'm
okay.
not reading chat.
Yeah,
but,
no reading chat. Nip, nip, nip.
okay, but there was a really good comment.
Nope.
It was
Nope.
really good. You would have liked
Focus,
it. Okay.
Andrea.
Okay,
Focus.
I've been multi.
Focus.
Okay, I'm listening.
Okay, I
Sorry.
know. It's easier to focus when you're reading chat. I know that.
I'm listening. Okay.
Okay.
Continue.
So now we can get to your questions. So actually, I got one more question. So, and Alex, you don't have to answer this. You alluded that ChatGPT is the best therapist you've seen. Have you seen a therapist outside of ChatGPT?
I have before, but I've never found someone who was a really great fit.
Great. Okay, so tell me why.
Well, like for example, the last therapist I saw in person, she was more a Freudian school of psychology.
Okay.
So like you are your trauma, where I'm more like an Adler school of psychology, where it's how you react to it. So like, I don't like when therapists like bring in all this stuff from your past and childhood and try
It's
to
not
tie it into
past.
what you're doing today.
Okay.
And I just felt like they sort of focus on the wrong things and it takes so long, whereas with chat, you could talk to them every day, give them so much information, and you move a lot quicker.
Okay. Tell me about have you seen someone who's not a Freudian therapist?
Um,
We live in LA. Just kidding.
we do live in LA. I mean, in college, but it was so long ago
Okay.
that I don't really remember.
Alex, do you think the subconscious is bullshit?
No, I think the subconscious is real.
How so?
Like I think we have so much intelligence that isn't just what is conscious. Like the experience you've had since like you were a kid, like maybe you don't completely remember some things, but your gut is a type of intelligence, and that is probably based off of your subconscious and things like that.
Okay, would you say that your gut is your normal intelligence just hidden, but the processes of your gut are basically very similar to the processes of your conscious mind just happening in the background? Or do you think your gut is qualitatively a different thing?
I think they're I think they're related.
Okay. Now, how would you feel if you got evaluated for autism and you were diagnosed with autism?
I'm not sure how I would feel.
Okay.
Uh, I think on one hand, it's like nice to get a diagnosis because it explains things about yourself. So that could be helpful. So like if I didn't have it, I'd say, okay, I guess I'm just weird and I have no excuse. But at the same time, I would honestly be shocked if I had it, because I've just assumed that a lot of people ask me if I have it because it's become trendy nowadays.
You would, so you said you would just accept that you're weird. What about you is weird?
It's hard to explain what. It's more like a feeling from having interacted with a lot of people, seeing where the norm usually is and seeing where I'm at in like most groups of people, as in weird being a deviation from the normal. I'm usually pretty highly deviated.
All right. What's
Chill.
funny, Andrea?
That answer was
Right?
Okay, reminds me when we asked Brian Johnson the same question and he went into a full math equation about the possibility of I don't even know what.
Yeah, so I think it's like when you explain weirdness in terms of statistical variations and standard deviations, I think that is a very great answer. I think it says a lot just about the way that your mind works. Okay.
Mhm.
So, okay. So now getting to your questions. Let's go through a couple of things. So one is, is a test valid? Generally speaking, yes, tests are very valid. So that's question number 2. Question number 1 is it important for you? I think it's really up to you. So I do think that there's a lot of weird stuff going on with autism spectrum disorder. So let's just go through the science of it. Mm-hmm. The first is that the rate of diagnosis is increasing. Now, why is that? There's probably a couple of different reasons. The first is that we used to only detect autism spectrum things in people who were disabled in some way, right? So like the more debilitated you are, the more likely you are to get diagnosed, because so that's number 1. Second thing is probably the other, actually, I've got 2 other questions for you. Alex, do you, I don't know how to ask this in the right way, so I'm going to muddle around a little bit. Do you dislike soup that has stuff in it?
Only if I don't like the stuff.
Okay, but you're okay if it's got like different textures and... What's so funny, Andrea? Is it just a weird question?
I just love this question.
Okay, great.
We ate a lot of soup growing up. Soup was like our parents' go-to food.
So are you like particular about what you eat, like from a textural standpoint?
No, I'm actually okay with that.
Okay. So here's cool. Thank you. So a couple things. One is I think that the rate of diagnosis is going up because we are now aware that a lot of people are on the spectrum that are basically fully functional, very happy, can have relationships, can have jobs, things like that. Second reason is because autism spectrum is related to paternal age. So as people are having kids at an older age, it's one of the few conditions, usually maternal age will correlate with like various challenges that kids will have, like Down syndrome risk increases with age. Actually, I mean, if you have a kid really young, it's high too. But paternal age is associated with like autism, and I suspect ADHD as well. So, like, I think it's the actual number I think is increasing. Like the percentage of people with autism spectrum disorder is actually on the rise for a couple of other reasons too. But also, I think we're just catching it way more. Now, whether you should get tested or not, I think it's just an issue of if you're moving in the direction that you want to go. Like if you're feeling like you're progressing in life and, it sounds like you're growing, it sounds like you're like, like progressing and all that kind of stuff. I don't know that it's like particularly useful for a diagnosis. I do think that it can sometimes be enlightening for some people, but I also don't like the diagnosis term because it makes it so binary. So if you're on the autism spectrum, you're like way on the like the high functioning kind of end. So at that point, I think really even with ADHD, so I think there's this element of like neurodiversity where we're sort of recognizing, so we think about these things as diagnoses as if they're binary. But I think my understanding of it is that like there are different types of brains. And the ADHD autism style of brain has certain advantages and disadvantages. Now, when we're talking about severe ADHD or severe autism, those are basically like pretty hard debuffs, disadvantages in life. But we also know, for example, like there's a theory that's somewhat been debunked that if you look at like hunters versus farmers, so a hunter is someone who goes out into the wilderness, needs to absorb a lot of stimuli, needs to be able to respond to things very quickly, and they can handle a lot of stimuli. They'd get bored out of their minds if they wake up at 5 a.m. every day and like work in the fields. And there are other people who like wake up at 5 a.m. every day. They hate chaos. They want to do the same fucking thing 5 days a week. Then I'm going to have my beer at 5 p.m. on a Friday. I'm going to do this on the weekend. So there's different types of people. So there are different like cognitive personalities that are probably related to our brains. So
I'm a hunter.
Huh? Yeah, you're a hunter for sure, right?
Yeah.
And Alex is a little bit of a farmer. I mean, is a little bit of a farmer.
You're my farmer.
Okay.
Right? So it's like consistency, and we're going to do this at this time, and this time, and we're going to be like diligent. So I think that there's, it could be that you are on the spectrum. I don't know. The test will reveal it, but I think it's really about the reason I would say in general that you should get evaluated for something is if you have some kind of problem that you are having difficulty solving, then additional information is important. So I think one of the biggest, most confusing things in medicine is you should not order a test unless it alters your treatment plan. So what are you going to do with that information? So I'd say if you're struggling in relationships, if you're struggling with your internal sense of self, so I imagine that like internally, like whether you're on the spectrum or not, internally, like it's weird, not in a bad, I mean, I don't know how to say that, but like I would suspect, since we're making comparisons, that Andrea has better visibility into the parts of herself than maybe you do, Alex. And
I think I've worked so much. It's taken me maybe more work, but I think I'm at a really good place now.
I see that, right? So, and I think it's interesting because I also wonder, like now I'm curious about whether one of the indicators of being on the spectrum is ChatGPT is the best therapist you've ever found. Right. So like that many of the things that are traditionally involved with therapists, like Freudian, like it's so like these weird, like, you know how like the rules that you have to make for socializing, like the weird therapists Andrea doesn't need rules. She's like intuitive. She's like a duck that knows how to swim. And you like need to know the rules, right? You need to know like what the different things mean. And then when you go into therapy and people are like talking about like the subconscious and your Oedipal complex and your anal phallic phase, and you're like, what the fuck is this? And ChatGPT is like, you had this happen, then this happened, then this is what it means, and this is what it means, and this is what it means. So it's very like kind of logical. I don't think though that that's a straight indicator of autism. Some people just think that way. And then that too gets to the other question of, do people who think in that way, are they somewhere closer to the spectrum? So I think it's all like shades of gray. I think, you can get tested if you want to. It's not a bad idea, but I would say that if there's something that you need some kind of like key to turn a lock where, okay, I'm having difficulty with this, I don't know how to approach this, then understanding yourself through the spectrum of, or the lens of neurodiversity may help you.
Got it.
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I think it does. I think I just would then have to ask myself another question of what would it help me with if that actually happened?
That I think is the most important question. Right? So what are you looking for? Sometimes you're looking for explanations. And like, I mean, people get overstimulated, not just people on the spectrum, by the way. So people with ADHD get overstimulated too.
Yeah.
Like I have a daughter who's probably neurodiverse and she sometimes just needs to like leave a birthday party. Like one of my daughters is probably neurotypical. And she's fine being at parties, and like the other one sometimes will just like go into a room for like 30 to 45 minutes and then she'll come out and she'll be fine.
There were two things you said that one of them I had a question, and the other one this is just a general question comment, but with like the whole ChatGPT as therapist, I wonder if it's more like, Alex's personality type is more inclined to find that as more useful therapist, or just as it becomes more of a tool that like everyone's going to start to use generally, everyone will enjoy having that info. But that was a really interesting take I didn't think about. But my question was when you're talking about that, I think you were saying, what was it about paternal age as you get older? It increases
the risk of neurodiversity and autism spectrum.
which I found so interesting because my mom just recently got diagnosed with her ADHD like a couple years ago, and obviously, like, you know, in her 50s, and I got diagnosed like this year with my ADHD, and in high school, middle school, like I never ever fit the mold of like an ADHD type. So I was more just curious why that is and what exactly it means. Like, does that mean like when you're young, it's non-existent, and then it forms later, or why, or
What
what would
ADHD you
that mean
mean?
exactly? Just like any other things being on the spectrum.
I'm sorry, I
Similar
don't. So on the spectrum, why people don't get diagnosed when they're young on the spectrum? Or are we talking about ADHD diagnosis?
I thought maybe I misunderstood. I thought you said that it's more likely to evolve with age.
Yeah. So okay. So this is what I'll clarify. So the age at which the father impregnates the mother determines the risk of autism.
Oh, okay. So you
So-
meant our parents' age.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
So
I thought
so
you
like
meant our age.
no. So I should have been clearer there.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
so yeah. So like if
Okay, that is
if a dude has a kid at the age of 35, that child has a lower risk of autism than if you have a child if a dude has, even if you if the mother is like in her 20s, and if you have like a
Yeah.
60-year-old dude, then that changes. But
Yeah,
I do
that one I was aware of. Yeah.
I do think it's very common for women, especially, to not get diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, primarily for two reasons. Number one is that girls are less likely to be hyperactive than boys. And hyperactivity is the thing that leads to diagnosis because hyperactivity is disruptive. So oftentimes girls who have ADD will be described as spacey, airheads. Like there's like a different kind of like societal framing for it where there's inattention in your head. You'll be wandering around, but you won't be like getting up and running in circles. So usually
makes sense.
disruptive male boys will get diagnosed because they fucking cause problems, and girls will be spacey is a term that gets used.
That makes
Fascinating
sense. Okay,
questions.
yeah.
How are you feeling about this conversation, Alex?
Good.
Okay.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Great questions.
How are you feeling about this conversation?
I'm loving it.
Good.
So I was concerned because I don't usually talk to two people at once, and I was really worried about like what this dynamic would be like. Right. So I kind of mentioned to y'all like what's up with y'all always doing two things, like, you know, y'all do
We
things
are
together.
one.
Yeah. And I think it's been really awesome observing y'all's interaction, because that's really strange. And by the way, has that been that way since y'all were kids?
As in understanding what the other person thinks that often?
Yeah.
I think we are more like that now than before because of how well we know each other and
Okay.
how well you know someone as a product of how much time we spent together and like similar problems and lifestyles.
When we
Okay.
were kids, she was the director and I was the actor, and I would be her little puppet, and we would play games, and I would act and stuff. So I'd say like there's other things of our dynamic that we did as kids, but not the connection, more just the little sibling, older sibling dynamic.
Yeah, so I've really enjoyed talking to both y'all. It turned out to be a lot less awkward than I was fearing, because I was like, I don't know how to have like I didn't know who do I talk to? You know, like usually I'll do like back and forth with people. That turned out to be really delightful to see. Secondly, I think y'all's story is really cool. I think learning about, because I do see this trend towards like individualism, which I think is not healthy. I think as we've started to prioritize ourselves, like we're also seeing a loneliness epidemic. I think y'all are probably two of the least lonely people in the United States in a really good way. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from that. I do think it's fascinating to hear y'all's story and how different y'all are, and also like how complementary y'all are, how you've like grown in different ways. And I think this issue of like whether someone is on the spectrum or not, which I hope the internet doesn't tear y'all apart for, is also really interesting. So it's been fantastic. And I know you need to get going soon, right, Alex?
Soon, yes.
Yeah.
Because if you guys are watching, I will be playing chess IRL in New York soon, so that'll be fun. And
Yeah.
I will stream it.
And also, yeah, I'm the one who brought up the autism spectrum conversation, mainly because I really wanted to hear your thoughts, and I thought everything you said was super helpful, and just I'm sure it was helpful for other people. So I was really happy to hear it as well.
I think that even if whether you're on the spectrum or not, I think understanding sometimes how, like neurodiversity affects you can be really helpful. Because I think that how can I say this? So like I made a video a couple years ago about how people who are on the spectrum are much more likely to be transgender. So and that has to do with the way that our brain like processes like the sense of where gender identity comes from certain internal signals that are processed by the empathic and emotional parts of our brain that are oftentimes different. So those parts of the brain just function differently in people who are on the spectrum. So since they function differently, they don't process internal signals in the same way. And since they don't process those internal signals, gender identity comes from the inside. It comes from like internal emotional signals, basically. Or not basically, but that's one of the key things. So I think there are things like that if you just learn more about how people on the spectrum navigate the world and the tools that they use, those can be helpful for you. And then the last really technical thing, and you asked, are tests good? Generally speaking, they're good. But this is going to sound kind of confusing. You can test positive for something and not have it. You can test positive for something and have it. You can test negative for something and not have it. And you can test negative for something and still have it. Is that, Joe, follow? I know it's kind of confusing, but it's like basically,
yes.
If you make a 2x2 table, you can test positive or negative, and sometimes that correlates with whether you have it or not. So I think it's really more about function. So it's like, is there something that you're hoping to gain? Like, is there a challenge that having the lens of an autism diagnosis and understanding, okay, like maybe I should look at these resources because this will help me in this way? I think that's really the important question.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Any last thoughts or questions before we wrap up? I didn't know if Andrea was going to stick around or we're wrapping up, or what do y'all want to do?
We'll wrap here.
Okay, cool. So last thoughts or questions before we wrap up?
No, but thank you so much for having us.
This was really enjoyable. I really liked hearing your thoughts. Sorry for getting distracted, but I genuinely enjoyed the whole conversation.
I didn't feel like you were distracted at all.
I was just trolling about the chat part.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, so sometimes people with ADHD have it's easier for them to focus with a distraction, which I know sounds really weird. But when I have patients in my office and I'm doing psychotherapy with them and they have ADHD, I'll oftentimes we'll use like knitting or something like that. They'll be like knitting or doing something else, and it helps them focus.
That's a great piece of advice for future things.
Yeah, so bring something to do with your hands and meditate with your eyes open. It may be easier to focus. Don't close your eyes when you meditate, or half-lidded gaze. Last tip, but
yeah, I never close my eyes, to be honest, when I meditate, because it's too
makes
boring.
sense. It makes it so much harder, right? You get more distracted
exactly.
in your head when your eyes are closed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So those are just little tips where there may be variances to the way that you will live your life if you're on the spectrum, if you're neurodiverse, and understanding those things can help you. The way I kind of think about it is I know y'all travel a fair amount, so we have our United States power cords, and the rest of society is in the EU power cord, and you just need a little adapter, and then everything works fine. But trying to get your stuff to fit in with the rest of the world can sometimes be hard.
Mm-hmm.
So where can we find y'all? Can y'all tell us what's coming up for Botez Live? And so you're chess streaming today in Washington Square Park, or I don't know if we.
Yeah, I'm going to be chess streaming from Washington Square Park on our channel.
Okay, cool.
So I'll see some people there soon. And then also our YouTube channel is Botez Live.
Yeah, and other things that y'all have coming up besides a chess stream today, what kind of, it sounds like y'all are experimenting with content nowadays, doing cool things, new things.
Andrea?
We've got a lot, but we usually rant about them on our chat. We both have 3 YouTube channels, so it's a mouthful. But chat, we are working on launching our 3rd channel now for our podcast. It's not going to be called Not a Podcast. It's actually going to have a name. We have 3 to 4 episodes already filmed, 2 comedians, 1 Brian Johnson, sister episode. We've been working really hard to launch it. I'm trying to choreograph a karate trailer, which probably won't happen, but just know that that's going to come out in the next 2 weeks. And in the meantime, we're still streaming once a week. Alex is streaming this week because she's in New York, and then I will be live next week. And yeah, chat knows the rest.
I
so.
may have a surprise stream this Friday that I'm
This-
setting up in New York that isn't chess. That will be fun. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Mhm.
Exciting. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for coming today. Good luck
Thank
with
you so
your...
much for having us.
Your-
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure.
Take care, everybody. Bye.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye, chat. Bye.
Bye, chat.
Bye,
Okay.
Dr. K.
Bye. All right. That was cool. Yeah, so I think it's great. Like I'm pretty sure I met Andrea a few years ago, but anyway, that is neither here nor there. Yeah, so interesting. You know, like I think it's so interesting how yeah, so interesting. I just need a second to process. Maybe we can, I mean, since we have a little bit of time, like if people have questions, I'm going to go ahead and pull up chat here for a second. And then if y'all have questions, like, because I think it was, I really appreciated the questions about, you know, autism and things like that, like, and whether it is, you know, like what's the purpose of a diagnosis? I think that there is a lot of weird stuff going on with autism right now where, and neurodiversity in general. So I think something is going on where there are a lot of normal experiences which people will equate to being on the spectrum or being ADHD. Like, oh my God, I forget my keys everywhere. Does that mean that I have ADHD? Like, no. So I think that there's a lot of like normalization, like things that are normal variants that happen to everybody that we're starting to pathologize. So I think that as a society, we're really moving in the direction of like hyper labeling things. I don't know if this kind of makes sense, right? So we have to have like a term for everything. So I remember this when I was working with, you know, as a psychiatrist in Boston, I was working with like a lot of people who like had trans identity, gender identity. And what blew me away was just the number of labels, right? So there was like demiflex and like demi-male, demi-woman, like, you know, so there were like the number of categories. It's like everyone is looking for a label, and like we're creating all these like categories, which is okay. I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with it, but I remember sort of thinking like, why can't you just be you? You know? So I think sometimes we don't realize that identity is something that is like naturally fluctuates over time, and there's a real tendency nowadays to want to like label something and say like, this is what's going on. I am this way because I'm autistic. I am this way because I'm ADHD. And somehow attaching a label to it brings people comfort. And I think it absolutely can in a very healthy way. Like for some people, you know, like it really clicks and it's like, oh, this explains so much about the difficulties I have in life. And at the same time, I think sometimes it can be damaging because if there is a period of flux and you're not careful, you can lock yourself into a label. And once you lock yourself into that identity, the really dangerous thing about that is that your sense of your identity will shape your future actions. So if I believe to myself, like if I say like, okay, I am ADHD, and whether you are or you aren't, this is true in both cases, then you start thinking of yourself as someone with ADHD. It starts to naturally restrict the kinds of things that you believe you're capable of. And the really scary thing about that is you believe those things because you have not been capable of them, right? So since you fail at something 1, 2, 3 times, you're like, oh, I'm just not good at school. And then you discover, okay, I have ADHD, and this means that I can't do well in school. So you've got to be super careful about the destiny that an identity label carries with it, which I think can be helpful in some ways and not helpful in other ways. And I think the big difference is once you get a label, does this become something that restricts your future options, or does it become a path to expanding your future options? Are these now obstacles that I'm going to overcome to continue to have a very broad horizon, or is it narrowing my horizon because I have ADHD? This means I can't do these things. And someone's saying it sounds like an excuse. Well, sometimes it becomes that. So I think this is what's really hard to understand is that anytime a human being has a real problem, the subconscious mind will hijack that real problem to become an excuse. And this is what's so confusing for people, is they're like, think like, oh my God, like this person is faking it. No, they're not faking it. They have the real problem. And just like a kid will learn, oh my God, like if you're 6 years old and you have a stomach ache and you stay home from school and your stomach ache is very real, that child will be more likely to develop a stomach ache when they're getting bullied. So like, this is just the way that the brain works, right? The brain figures out what works and then it repeats the behavior. So this is what's so confusing for people. It's like ADHD is real and a lot of people will use it as an excuse. That's really common. The best studies on that, I think, come from epilepsy, actually. And 50% of people with psychogenic seizures, which are non-epileptiform seizures, will have real epilepsy as well. It's not 50% of people with epilepsy develop psychogenic seizures. It's the other way around. So if you have psychogenic seizures, there's a really good chance that you have epilepsy as well. So it's really challenging, right? It's like we've got to be careful with information. Let me see what questions people have. Can you elaborate on your question about internal anger and its outward expression? So one thing that I thought was cool about that, right? So is like, I asked Alex, like, hey, do you feel like internally way more angry than the expression? She's like, no. And Andrea's like, yes. And everyone is terrified of you. So I think that's like, it's like, so, I mean, we don't really know, right? But I think that's like, what other people are able to empathically read from us is different from our own self-awareness. Very common in neurodiversity. So, just that oftentimes what we know about the reason that we call it neurodiversity is because we know that there's actually some similarities between the brains of people with autism spectrum and the brains of people with ADHD. And a key part of one of the key features there is difficulty with emotional regulation. So oftentimes people with ADHD will experience emotions more intensely, more rapidly, and for longer duration. So if I take a neurotypical brain, I get pissed over the course of 2 or 3 minutes. ADHD brain can get pissed within 15 to 20 seconds, or even less, like less than 5 seconds. And then we'll stay pissed longer, and then we'll be more pissed from the same thing. And so oftentimes what'll happen is like, and what people will learn is like a lot of masking, right? So they'll learn, if they're on the spectrum, they'll learn that like this kind of anger is inappropriate, unacceptable. So internally, they'll feel very, very, very angry. Sometimes they show it on the outside, sometimes they don't. So I think other good examples of this is like, sometimes I'll, like if I have my gaming buddies, the ones that are on the spectrum will get really, really caught up in stuff. And it can be hard. What do you think with ADHD then, if it is not detectable by yourself? So I think it is detectable by yourself. Have you ever thought about... how does neurodivergence relate to alexithymia? Really connected. So alexithymia is the inability to recognize your internal emotional state. So oftentimes people with alexithymia will use words like frustrated, sucks, crappy, right? So they'll give you the direction of the emotion. Like, this is a negative emotion, but what flavor of emotion is it? Is it fear? Is it anger? Is it shame? Is it sadness? Is it grief? Is it a feeling of powerlessness? So oftentimes people who are alexithymia can tell you like, yeah, man, like it sucks. Yeah, bro. Sucky things are shitty, bro. And you're like, yeah, man, shitty things suck, bro. I know, dude. And like, that's what our conversation is like. There's no emotional color to it. We know the valence of the emotion, whether it's positive or negative, but we don't have a color or flavor to it. So what we also know about the brains of people who are neurodiverse is that since they experience emotions so much more intensely, one may think that if I experience an emotion intensely, the signal is way higher, I should understand what it is. But it turns out that there are a couple of really interesting mechanisms that, even if you experience emotion intensely, will paradoxically make it harder for you to realize that you're experiencing an emotion. So the first is that in order to understand your emotion, you need to be able to look at it, not be absorbed by it. So if you take someone who is intensely angry and you tell them to calm down, what are they going to say? They're going to say, I don't need to calm down. I'm perfectly calm. You need to calm down. So understanding what you feel requires the ability to observe your feelings. You cannot observe your feelings if you are absorbed by your feelings. When you get swept away, there's no awareness, and then you can't even know what you're feeling. Second thing is, in cases of extreme anger, we also know there's decreased transmission across the corpus callosum, which is right brain is where we experience emotions, left brain is where we like analyze things and where our logic comes from. And generally speaking, our capacity to understand our emotions comes from the left brain looking at the right brain and being able to say, hey, you're really pissed right now. The problem with that is that when we decrease traffic across the corpus callosum, which gets triggered by very intense emotion. So when the emotional amount gets so high, our brain is like, basically, we're going to Alt F4 communication between our two hemispheres. We know this stuff because of really awesome research about trauma and dissociation. So very intense emotion will trigger dissociation. And the mechanism of that dissociation involves in some way decreased activity across the corpus callosum. So the real irony here is that generally speaking, the more intense your emotions are, the less likely you are to be aware of what you feel. And I see this all the time, especially in the men that I work with, because, you know, I remember this saying, I forget what the quote is from, that men live lives of quiet desperation, right? So there's like this sense of like intense desperation, intense like I gotta do it pressure. So I think that like the primary subjective experience of what we call anxiety in men is pressure. Pressure to perform, pressure that I have to make it go right, pressure that it could go wrong. So it doesn't feel like anxiety, it feels like pressure. So there's a lot of stuff about, you know, being unaware of our emotions, not being able to recognize our emotions that has to do with the intensity of the emotion. So I think there's a whole different, like y'all know the feelings wheel, like there's a whole different feelings wheel for dudes. Have you tried ChatGPT as a therapist for yourself? I think you would better understand why people like it. So this is why we're doing the thing tomorrow. So tomorrow we have a therapist versus AI like segment that I'm really excited about. Hopefully it goes well. But basically what we're going to do is run through a series of cases, present a case to therapists and to ChatGPT and see what each one says. Right? So like, I think we should do a head-to-head comparison. And for all the people who say people like ChatGPT as a therapist, I totally understand that people like it. That doesn't mean that it's good. You understand? So this is what's really tricky about therapy. I'm not saying it is good or it isn't good. Oftentimes, the most important therapy are things that feel bad for the patient at a period of time. So like sometimes the best therapy feels really bad for some amount of time before it feels really good, before it really helps. And that's just hard for people. And I think there's other problems too, because sometimes, and this is the hard thing about therapy, is like, if therapy is really bad, or if sometimes therapy that feels bad is actually very helpful for you, how do you know whether you get crappy therapy or you get good? Are you in the process of good therapy leading to a breakthrough? So people are saying, what do you mean about a bad time in therapy? So one of the most useful things that can happen in therapy is for you to feel like the therapy is not working and then work through it. So I'll give you all like a really simple example of this. So I once had a patient who I saw for like 18 months, or not 18 months, maybe about 9, 10 months. They came in, I was early in my training. I was, I think, a second or third year psychiatry resident, maybe third year. So about 9 months into third year, they kind of come in and I'm like, I know this is going to sound weird, man. Do you feel like this is helping? Because they come in and they would like talk about the same shit that is like depressing them like week after week after week. I'm depressed about this. I'm depressed about this. I'm depressed about this. I'm depressed about this. And I'd be like really validating. I'd be like, okay, like, wow, that sounds really hard for you. Like, that sounds really hard for you. Like, it sounds like you're suffering a lot. And oh my God, it must be hard. It's so hard. It's so hard. Right? Because as therapists, like, we're supposed to be like validating, like, oh my God. And so then I asked him, I was like, do you feel like this is helping? And he's like, not really. And he didn't say that. He's like, isn't this what we're kind of supposed to be doing? And I was like, and so then we got into a really interesting conversation. It's like, what are we actually doing? Like, what's the point? Like, what does success in therapy mean to you? Like, what? And he's like, I thought therapy was coming in and talking about my problems. Isn't that what I'm supposed to do? And I was like, yeah, I thought therapy, like, look, man, I'm a second year psychiatry resident. I thought therapy was talking about your problems too. And I was like, hey, man, do you think this is working? Are you like, is this working? And he's like, I don't know. I thought this is what we're supposed to do. And I was like, I don't know. I thought this is what we were supposed to do too. And so we're kind of sitting there and we're like, okay, now what? Talking about my problems doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, cool. Okay, if this doesn't work, what does working look like? Like, what do you actually want to get? Right? And I was like, what would make you happy? And that's when we started getting like really concrete. And he's like, well, like, this is what I'm unhappy about. And I was like, okay, like, instead of talking about it, how about we like try to fix it? Wild idea. Right? And so he had certain things that he wanted to do and certain people that he wanted to date and certain things that he wanted from relationships. And so then like we sort of had this like revelation of, okay, like, we're going to stop doing therapy. Come back next week, but no more therapy. And that's when the real therapy began, because now it's like, okay, like what, like you want to do this thing, like what's getting in the way? Like, let's think about that. And that was my first intro. Actually, I know therapists will have an issue with this, with coaching. So like, there's this like point where I got frustrated about how like there's this idea in therapy that coming in and talking about it over and over and over again will like somehow help people. I don't think that's always the case. So then I kind of got into coaching. And I was talking to the chief of psychiatry at McLean Hospital and was talking to him about 2 years later after walking this road. So then a couple of other steps. So then what happened, about 6 months later, I got fired by a supervisor, which is the first time that had ever happened in the history of our program. And one of my supervisors like went to my program director and was like, look, I can't supervise this kid. And they were like, why can't you supervise the kid? And they're like, he's not doing therapy. Like, he's doing something. He doesn't want to stop doing it. He really likes it. The patients seem to like it, but it's not therapy. And so my program director was kind of like taken aback, and they were like, okay, like what's going on? We talked about it. And then they found me a different supervisor that was a lot more comfortable with the work that I was doing. And then that started the whole track. And so like, that's where it's like, I think there's a lot of stuff that therapy is great for, but I do think that there are some like things that therapy kind of is biased towards, so that we have certain biases in therapy that, first of all, oftentimes therapists won't accept responsibility or accountability for patients' goals. Not all therapists, right? So there are all kinds of therapy like behavioral activation and sometimes CBT, which is all about like goal setting and changing your behaviors and actions and stuff like that. But sometimes it's like this weird psychodynamic kind of stuff, which I love, by the way. Don't get me wrong. I love it. But sometimes it's not. There's a difference between, you know, validation and bitching about your problems, which can be therapeutic, but sometimes people need to like change their environment and actually like go out and do shit. And that branch started out as something called positive psychology and then evolved kind of into coaching, which then we were like, okay, we're going to use these methodologies like motivational interviewing and asking powerful questions, but we're not going to like treat pathology anymore. It's not about depression. It's about accomplishing what you want in life. So I don't remember where that story started, but anyway, so I've had patients who therapy didn't work for them. And I think it doesn't work for everyone, or there's a therapist-patient mismatch, one of the two. Okay, this is a cool question. Yeah, so someone's saying long live ACT. So I think we're sort of seeing this, right? So the cool thing is that like therapists are recognizing this. So I'm not the only one. So people are recognizing. So I think like Marsha Linehan recognized with DBT that like talking about your feelings is not sufficient, that we need some way to actually like control your feelings, which to one brand of therapists is going to feel very antithetical to what therapy is about. It's not about controlling your feelings at all. It's about exploring and understanding and getting to the bottom of things. And Marsha Linehan was like, look, when you're suicidal and you feel like cutting, we need to shut off the emotion. We need to regulate the emotion. We need grounding techniques. ACT is another really good example of here we are in therapy, like talking about things, and the ACT is like, okay, we're going to just accept that we can't fix this. Just accept. Don't try to fix anything. Just can't fix anything. And paradoxically, the moment that you accept that you can't fix things, that becomes the moment at which you get freed from certain expectations. And paradoxically, like you can act in a manner that is in service to your values. You can start moving forward in life. And then someone was asking about, what was this? Damn it, I saw a good question. And I got, oh yeah. How does distraction help you focus? So this is fascinating. I'm going to try to show you all this. So this is so cool. Let me see if I can find this. Let me see. Yeah, this is great. Okay, so we're gonna watch this. Okay, I'm gonna just learn it, leave it. Okay, so I'm gonna show you. I don't know if y'all have seen this video. So the question is, how does distraction help you focus? So this is a time lapse of a 10-minute video of a kid with ADHD. And in this, they're absorbed in it. And in this, they're bored with the math video, and look at what they do. So the question is, why do people with ADHD do this? Like, what is going on in their brain? Okay. So let's understand this. So in order to achieve optimal focus, our brain needs a certain level of stimulus. Right? So I know this sounds kind of weird where we say like, okay, generally speaking, don't we need to minimize distractions to increase our focus? That's not true. So oftentimes what you'll notice is even if you're trying to study, you need something to trigger a stimulus, like a book or a lecture. You need something to engage you. So we have a very interesting like threshold of like optimal focus. If we have too much stimulus, our optimal focus gets destroyed. If we have too little stimulus, our optimal focus gets destroyed. So what happens is people with ADHD require more stimulus than a neurotypical person for optimal focus. This is why people with ADHD sleep better with white noise as opposed to silence. This is why they study better with a TV in the background or something like music, or even this is why people will lecture better with like Twitch chat open, or they'll pay attention to a lecture with Twitch chat open on the side. So the reason for that, and here's the crazy thing, if you force an ADHD brain into a critically low stimulus situation, what you will see is this. They will actually create a stimulus for themselves. This is literally what the brain is doing, because the moment I start spinning, my stimulus threshold increases, and then I enter into optimal focus. So when I have patients with ADHD, I will ask them to meditate with their eyes open. When I have patients with ADHD and I do therapy with them, I'll sometimes take walks. So like we're going to go outside, we're going to sit on a park bench, we're going to walk through the park, we're going to have our conversation. You know, we'll be quiet if like people walk by us or things like that. But like generally speaking, we will increase the stimulus in the room. I'll serve them tea, like we'll have snacks. Like there's something that is engaging them. And when they are engaged with their other senses, They don't have to self-stimulate. So here's the other crazy thing that people don't understand. Distracting thoughts when you are trying to focus with ADHD are sources of self-stimulation to help you focus. Because when you can't spin in a chair, when you force yourself to be still, there's no other music that you can distract yourself with, the mind will create another stimulus to help you focus, which is distracting thoughts, which is the best that it can do. So it requires a certain amount of upregulated stimulus in order to focus. Then what'll happen is after we do that for a while, the mind usually poops out, and then they will require understimulation. Then they will require a dark room. They will require potentially no stimulation. That can happen too. But usually there's like a certain way to, certain ideal threshold. So that's why. It's just, let me see if I can think about, is there a good paper that explains this? I don't remember. I can't think of a paper from the top of my head, but that's absolutely how it works. Back to soup. Okay, so what's the deal with the soup? So people who are neurodiverse, they are more likely to have so if we think about ADHD or autism spectrum, one of the key things that's different is sensory processing, right? So if you think about a kid with ADHD, we just saw them swiveling around in a chair. So the way that their brain processes sensation is different. True of autism spectrum as well. So sometimes what I found is like, and this happened with my daughter, literally. So my wife one day made dal. For those of you guys that don't know, dal is like an Indian soup, really yummy. Let me see if I can find this for y'all. Right, so like this is a picture of dal. So as you guys see, like if you look at a picture of dal, right, like it's got a bunch of stuff in it. Oh, I guess y'all can't see that one. Oh, you can see it here on the right side. So there. You guys see this picture over here? Lentil curry with tamarind. Great. So it's got a bunch of stuff in it. And one day, so my wife is a great cook. And she makes great dal. So she's making dal. And then, like, my younger kid didn't like it. And then, so, my wife was like, you got to eat it. You got to eat your dal. Like, you got to eat it. It's healthy. And so then I remember when I was a kid, I hated the textures of all the different things in dal. Like, I hated that there's, like, little crunchy bits and little seeds and little this and, like, cilantro. And, like, it's not that I, like, didn't like the flavor. It's just that all the weird stuff in my mouth felt, like, really disgusting. So then I did something, and I asked my kid. She was, like, 6. And I was like, do you dislike the flavor or do you dislike all the stuff in your mouth? And she was confused by the question. She didn't understand what that meant. Like, she doesn't know what flavor and texture really is. Like, 6-year-olds usually don't have that as part of their vocabulary. So then I strained the dal. And I was like, eat this. So I strained it, and she ate the plain dal, and she's like, this is fine. And then here's the crazy thing. I put all the stuff that I strained on her plate. And I was like, eat that. And she could eat that. She can eat them separately. She just can't eat them together. And this is because the way that we process textures, the way that we process sensory information is different if you're neurodiverse. So there's all kinds of like things like that where it's like just the way that your mouth handles textures. So now one of the things I've started doing is when I'm working with people who are neurodiverse, I've started asking them ever since that, I've started asking them like, hey, by the way, do you dislike different flavors different textures in your mouth at the same time? And the most severe cases of this that I would describe for neurotypical people is if you're eating eggs and you get a bit of eggshell. It's just a bit of crunchiness, but it's fucking disgusting. Technically, it's like not that big of a deal. Like we add crunchy things to soft things all the time. And like it just feels awful. And what I realize is that all these parents out there that are forcing their neurodiverse kids, they're like adding eggshells to their eggs. Yeah, so someone's joking that I don't know if your wife is a great cook if the ingredients are better separated than in the dish. Yeah, so that's my point, is that like depending on how our sensory processing circuitry is, something that it tastes delicious. She likes the taste. Taste is really good. All the flavors have been infused into the dal, so even if you remove everything, like most of the flavor is there, or a lot of the flavor. It's the texture. Make sense? Wait, that happened to me too? Yeah, so this is also a remember. So people are like, oh, this happened to me as a kid, so now I can eat dal with stuff in it. Not a big deal. So this is also what we've got to remember. The brain grows. The brain matures. The brain is able to better, or as your frontal lobes grow and strengthen, they can tolerate jitteriness from other parts of our brain better. So another one, I hated crunchy peanut butter as a kid. I still hate crunchy peanut butter. I think it's disgusting. Love peanut butter, hate crunchy peanut butter. Yeah, so cloth is another important one. Being very sensitive to like what kind of cloth you can tolerate. Yep. Is it really connected with neurodiversity? Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. Right? We know that neurodiversity involves differential sensory processing in the brain. Is it possible to have ADHD but no sensory issues with food? 100% yes. So what we know is that like the reason we use the term diversity, which I think is a pretty good word, is because there's a constellation of things and not everyone has the same set. So how does that relate to eating disorders like ARFID? Fantastic question. So I think there is overlap between ARFID, ADHD, and autism. I think that there's like common things going on in the brain, especially. So ARFID is basically the sensory processing issues localized to the gustatory system and without other elements of autism spectrum or ADHD. Yeah. Yeah, so I think this is, so y'all have to, like, I don't know if this kind of makes sense, but see, y'all have to remember that our diagnoses are not like, in psychiatry, our diagnoses are not reducible to particular, like, biological phenomenon. They're patterns. They're syndromes. Okay, so if I look at something like cystic fibrosis has all of this mucus that builds up in the lungs because we have a defect in a chloride transporter gene. The part of your cells, your lung cells that transport chloride just don't work because your gene is a little bit sus. So it doesn't make the right protein, or the protein is malfunctioning in some way. So we end up with cystic fibrosis. We know what the problem is. We know what the phenotype is, what the manifestation is. We know what the genotype is. We know exactly what causes the problem and how the problem manifests. So if we look at psychiatric illnesses, like major depressive disorder, we know, generally speaking, what it looks like, right? We have 5 out of 9 criteria that you have to check the boxes for. Why are there 9 criteria instead of 11? Why isn't it 5 out of 5? Like, what's the deal here? So even in our diagnostic systems, we acknowledge that, hey, there's a lot of people who seem depressed. How do we define that? How do you know if you're really depressed or you're just sad, or if you're grief or you've got a thyroid problem? Like, how do we define it? And basically what people did is they sat down, they looked at a bunch of data, and they said, okay, when we take 100 psychiatrists who say that, okay, this patient is depressed, this patient is depressed, this patient is depressed, what are the common elements? And what they essentially concluded, and this actually started out with research criteria. So originally what they did is they tried to figure out, how are we going to study depression? If we're doing a study on people who have major depressive disorder, or depressed, wasn't major depressive disorder at that point, how do we know who to include and who not to include? So researchers sat down and they said, okay, to include someone in the trial, they have to check 5 of these 9 boxes. That's how we're going to decide as a field, like, how are we defining depression for the sake of studying it? And then that became a clinical thing because now you have a trial that's looking at a particular medication that works for people who check 5 of these 9 boxes. So how do you know who to prescribe the medication to? They have to check 5 out of those 9 boxes as well. So our system of psychiatric diagnosis is about pattern recognition, not biology, not physiology. We don't know. It's just like, this is a pattern. In the moment that you start talking about patterns, there are going to be things that don't fit the pattern, but still kind of work. So my best example of this is if y'all play games with off-meta builds. Oh, there's like a meta carry build right now. There's a meta ADC build. There's a meta mid build. There's a meta whatever build, right? That's like most of the people play this hero or this champion in this role, and this makes sense. Occasionally, you'll have someone who shows up, can still play carry, can still play ADC, but they're not doing the meta build. So we have things like off-meta depression, atypical depression. We have atypical anxiety, right? And it's not like, and good examples of this are like, you know, atypical. So I'll give you all an example of an off-meta build. We think about depression as feeling sad. There's one group of people who's severely depressed who doesn't feel sad. Men. And what they primarily feel is anger. So there is a third subtype. There is anxious depression, neurovegetative depression, and depression with anger attacks. So neurovegetative depression is like, can't get out of bed, weight gain, low energy, feels like my body is super heavy. And then there's anxious depression, can't go to sleep, restless, moving around, lose weight, low appetite, right? Insomnia versus hypersomnia. And then there's a third type, which is depression with anger attacks, which also responds better to dopaminergic medications. Things like ropinirole, things like restless leg syndrome medications work better for people with depression with anger attacks. Usually happens to men, but their primary symptom is instead of sadness, they feel angry all the time, really short fuse, feel somewhat restless. Being pissed off is the primary manifestation. Because if you kind of think about it, I know this doesn't, like, think about this for a second, right? So we have anxiety disorders. We have disorders where people feel anxious. We have disorders where people feel sad. We have disorders where people feel ashamed. What is the disorder when people feel pissed? What do we call that? Sometimes it's things like IED, intermittent explosive disorder. But sometimes the root, probably what's going on in the biology, is actually something that we would call depression. It just manifests as anger. So on the outside, it looks like anger, but there's something going on the inside that when it floats to the surface, presents as anger instead of sadness. So atypical anxiety, I think, manifests as pressure. So there's like atypical presentations of things. And misophonia is a great example of something that is also in this neurodiversity spectrum, sensory processing issue. For those of y'all that don't know, so y'all know how, like, when you get eggshells in eggs, that really ruins your experience of the eggs. Misophonia is that for sound. So certain sounds will feel like on the ears what eggshells feel like in food. The best example for many people with misophonia is the way that nails on the chalkboard feel to you is the way that many normal sounds, like chewing, feel to people with misophonia. I think creates that, like, what's the problem with nails on the chalkboard? It's like, makes you go like this. So people with misophonia will go like this when they hear people chew. Sort of that, it's torture. Now y'all know what it's like to have misophonia. It's torture, just existing in the world. So tinnitus, I think, is a little bit different. Okay, so tinnitus is different. IMO. So tinnitus is different for a couple of reasons. First is that tinnitus can be environmentally induced. Okay, so I mean, some people I imagine can be born with tinnitus, but if we look at ARFID, if we look at ADHD, we look at autism spectrum, we look at misophonia, generally speaking, these are not developed conditions. You don't wake up at the age of 35 and develop misophonia, generally. I don't think about, I mean, I'm sure it's happened, but generally speaking, that's not what happens. People will usually develop misophonia when they're young, ARFID when they're young. Whereas with tinnitus, what we know is tinnitus is very highly correlated with auricular damage. So people who go to really loud concerts end up with tinnitus. People who work at construction sites end up with tinnitus. I suspect, this is like Dr. K's like weird crackpot theory, that noise cancellation headphones increase the risk of tinnitus. What I've noticed is in my patients that have developed tinnitus, I've started paying attention. I noticed that a lot of them will be these like perpetual like noise cancellation headphone users. And so I don't know about that because I actually looked, there are studies that do not indicate that that is a risk factor. But what we know is that damage to the ears can cause tinnitus. So very high decibel sounds. So wear earplugs when y'all go to concerts, for sure. That we know. You know, if you're at a construction site, use noise protection headphones. So we know that tinnitus is oftentimes induced by injuries, but not always. So I think it's not quite as genetic as some of these other things. I don't understand the question, Goloso98. How would you describe ADHD to parents who mostly say that some feelings, actions are normal? So I'll try to, yeah, you can meditate on tinnitus, but tinnitus is like, I've been trying to figure out how to treat tinnitus for the last 5 years and haven't figured out a good way to do it. It's really hard. So noise canceling usually makes tinnitus worse. So tinnitus usually gets worse when it's more quiet. Many people with tinnitus will do better when they have some kind of sound to counteract it. So there was a question about like, you know, what do you do if you have ADHD and your parents say this is normal? So this is really common. One of the reasons that parents don't believe in ADHD is because they have ADHD and they were never diagnosed with anything. And when you say, hey, this is weird, they're like, it's not weird. I've had it my whole life. Really eye-opening moments and really challenging for people who realize they have ADHD, because when you go and talk to your parents are like, yeah, I've been dealing with that my whole life. That's not a problem. I ended up okay, except they kind of didn't. Right? Except they like had a lot of difficulty. And even if you ended up okay, that doesn't mean that you started out okay or that ending up okay was like really easy to do. So one of the most strange things is when you have parents that have untreated mental illness, they will think that that is normal. So I once had a patient with BPD who would feel intense emptiness and just this like nauseating like void inside them that was just sad no matter what. Just this intense like well of overflowing sadness. And so they would go talk to their dad about it, and their dad was like, this is why I make art, because that's how life is. And so their dad had learned all of these like coping mechanisms, but essentially had the same sensation as their daughter of this like intense negative void that just lived within them and was like some days just impossible to feel any kind of happiness. It was so interesting. Yeah, it's really bad. There's a reason why BPD is associated with very high suicidality. Oh, aphantasia is fascinating. So aphantasia is something that I do not understand at all. And so aphantasia is let me figure out what the exact definition is. But the weird neurological syndromes are great, dude. The inability to voluntarily visualize mental images. So here's the crazy thing. I don't understand aphantasia at all. And there are two reasons why this could be. So out of all the clinical conditions, aphantasia is the thing that I don't understand at all. And I can't tell if I don't understand aphantasia because my mind's eye is such a natural part of me that I can't imagine not being able to visualize something, or because I'm actually aphantasic. And so the concept of, I don't know if this makes sense, it's such a mind fuck. The concept of being able to visualize an image, I've never been able to visualize an image. So since I've never, it's like telling someone who's blind, like, oh, like you're blind. And it's like, this is just normal for me. I don't know if I'm aphantasic. So I figured this out recently because my wife was asking me about paint. And she's like, visualize this. And I was like, I can't do that. She's like, just imagine what it would look like. And I was like sitting there and I was like, I cannot do that. I cannot imagine what this would look like. Like my mind is blank. And she got really frustrated with me. And I was like, what is going on? Like, you can do this? You can just picture this room with this color? I can't do that. So I don't know. It's really weird. I may have aphantasia. Can you visualize what you will draw? I don't think so. I don't have a vision in my head. I have a plan. But I can't see the picture before I draw it. That's why the drawing is so chaotic, because I don't have a visualization of it ahead of time. I can see words. Yeah, so this is what's really weird. Like, so I suspect that a lot of us have these deficits and we just don't know. I'm terrible at drawing. You guys have seen my picture. You've seen what I try to write. I'm terrible at it. So maybe I'm aphantasia. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not. I don't know. I can't tell. Right? Because that in and of itself is really weird. It's like, do you have this capacity or do you lack it? I don't know. Can't you visualize a letter instead? I mean, I know what a letter looks like. I don't know if I can see a mental picture of a letter. I don't know. So internal monologue is another really fun one. So some people don't have, like, something like 30% of people don't have an internal monologue, which blows my mind. My internal monologue, I have all kinds of thoughts and I talk to myself all the time. It's like so weird. Like, so this is what's super cool. Is like, all of us are going through life with like vastly different internal experiences. Like vastly different. And no one knows this. No one knows that like some people can't visualize images. Some people don't have internal dialogue. Some people like have eggshells in dal. Like, and it's like we're all like, some people like, it's wool feels terrible. Some people wool feels great. And here's the other really weird thing. A little bit of self-disclosure. So recently I've been doing a lot more meditating, and now like I can't wear clothes when I meditate. Just can't wear them anymore. Feels really bad. Anytime I meditate, if I'm wearing clothes, just can't do it. Feels terrible. It's really weird. I don't know what's going on. So it's like, you know, like it's kind of weird. Like I like get it now. Like when I meditate, this is great. Wool feels like sandpaper. Clothes feel like sandpaper. It's weird. Have y'all ever experienced this when you meditate? That you just can't wear anything anymore? Or am I just fucking weird? I don't meditate fully naked. But I'll wear chaddis. Chaddis. Meditation. Dude, I love chat, dude. Oh my God. So based. We're going to do nuditation. I love it. I love it. It's so good. Welcome, Jacob. Thanks for catching us live. We're about to sign off because we're now talking about nuditation. The meta tempter. It's so good. Will there ever be yoga practice videos to complement the guide? I hope so, but I don't know when. I hope so, y'all. Look, there's like a ton of stuff to do. Yeah, so can you use Memory Palace? I never understood Memory Palace. I was like, what are these people talking about? Like this visualizing of memories in different places? I have no idea what they're talking about. What does Dr. K know about the Cotard delusion? You think that I don't know what the Cotard delusion is? The feeling that parts of your body are melting away or dead inside you, that you have organs that are rotting? Usually a manifestation of, interestingly enough, not schizophrenia, but depression with psychotic features. I think more likely to be Cotard delusion. And the really interesting thing, so this is what's really cool about Cotard delusion. So Cotard delusion is like when people believe that a part of them is rotting. So if you look at the mechanism, it's fascinating. What people usually have is a smell. They smell something that smells foul or rotting. Then what happens is their association cortex becomes hyperactive, and they start to try to interpret what could be the reason why everywhere I go, I smell a rotting smell. They also have probably some kind of like proprioceptive blindness combined with a smell, combined with a hyperactive association cortex. So I don't feel, something feels missing inside me. I don't feel something inside me. That the ability to tell where I am, like if I close my eyes and I go like this, I'm going to be able to feel where my arms are. So that sense is somehow impaired. I have this constant smell that follows me around that smells a little bit rotting or stinky. And then I have a hyperactive association cortex that tries to make sense of these two things. And usually my thought process is psychotic, which means that when I have a thought, I believe the thought is real. And these 4 or 5 things, I think, is what results in the Cotard delusion. Anybody else want to pimp me? We can play this game. Can cannabis induce psychosis? Absolutely. So, cannabis has multiple psychoactive compounds. The really interesting thing is that cannabis, the THC in cannabis is propsychotic. The CBD in cannabis is antipsychotic. So what tends to happen, this is why synthetic cannabinoids like K2, which are usually isolates of THC, are much more likely to induce psychosis than natural cannabis. So people who are saying it's balanced, it maybe used to be. But now what started to happen is as we concentrate cannabis, the balance is, I think, going away. Can meditation help with going through a breakup or going through finding a goal? I think so. But I mean, it's like you got to be a little bit careful. So since people are asking about meditation, so here's like a good example of what we're trying to do. People are asking about yoga and stuff. So people are asking about, meditation. So I want to show you all something. This is something we're working on. So we have like a bazillion meditations, okay? Like we've taught meditation like a bazillion ways. We still teach it many more ways. So we're trying to develop tracks that are focused. We'll give you all focused practices that will ideally help you move forward in particular ways. So there's a beginner track, which is like the basics of meditation. And then there are tracks for, this is the searching. Where's the track? So here's the beginner track. And then we've got 2 other tracks that we're developing right now. Because a lot of people are like, okay, there are a bunch of these meditations. Which one should I do? So it'll do things like track your progress. And then, where's the other tracks, bro? Oh, here we go. Hold on. So we get these questions like this, right? So we got to figure this out. This is all beginner track. Here we go. So here are the 3 tracks. So beginner track, focus and impulse control, and then emotional processing. So there are beginner, intermediate, and advanced tracks. And they're like basically like programs of meditation that synthesize various things that we've taught that y'all can kind of track, right? So you can like accrue things, make sure you're staying solid with the practice, like 12 sessions completed, 124 minutes. And then it gives you a track based on what your goals are. So this is the beginner track that starts with usually Nadi Shuddhi, you know, has broken up into 4 weeks or 5 weeks. And then you slowly, like, it'll introduce new practices that are a little bit more advanced. So those of y'all that know, you know, oftentimes Anulom and Vilom is considered the same as Nadi Shuddhi. But it's not. It's only the same if you don't understand the Sanskrit. So we're trying to build some of this stuff. So like when people are like, hey, can meditation help with this? Like we hope that we will be able to put together things that will help with particular, will help with particular goals. Yeah, lecture on cognitive dissonance. Sure, I can work on it. I can work on it, chat. All right, y'all. We'll see y'all tomorrow for Doctors versus AI. Hopefully it'll be interesting. So it's great. So Alex is like, ChatGPT is better than any therapist I've ever had. So let's see. Let's see how therapists and AI will respond to various like scenarios or cases. And we'll see. Like, I think that's what we're here to do. Just see what happens. Right? So some people say AI sucks. I tried. So other people say AI is great. I have clients and stuff that use AI have told me that's very helpful. So we'll see. Let's see what happens.